Welcome back, brothers, to Warhammer. Tonight we're diving into the lore of my boy Sebastian Yarrick. Before we get to the madness, be sure to like and comment any videos and topics you want to see in the future. Be sure to subscribe for the Emperor. I want to thank you guys for the support. I've been killing it like always. Now, let's get into the video.
Icaria was dying badly. The world did not pass into darkness with dignity. It came apart screaming beneath a sky poisoned green by energies that had no rightful place in the material universe. Mountain ranges split from root to summit, their stone faces cracking open like infected wounds. Magma surged through the fractures in arterial torrents. Oceans fled their basins as steam, climbing into the atmosphere in continent-sized pillars before the pressure hurled them back down as boiling rain. Across the heavens, green lightning crawled between burning ships. It moved with hateful purpose, forking from cloud to cloud and vessel to vessel, caressing Imperial hulls before breaking them open. Cruisers vanished inside spheres of emerald fire. Escorts tumbled from formation with their prows sheared away. Hundreds of thousands of voidsmen died without ever seeing the enemy, crushed against bulkheads, burned alive in sealed compartments, or dragged into the vacuum through wounds wider than city plazas. The Orc machine stood upon the world below. Its true shape was impossible to comprehend. It had consumed mesas, fortresses, reactor fields, and entire mountain chains during its construction. Spires of rusted iron pierced the clouds. Generator towers vomited green radiance into the atmosphere. Miles of cables, each thick enough to carry a battle tank, writhed in the electrical storms like living worms. The machine was killing Icaria. Commissar Sebastian Yarrick ordered the fleet to advance. The bridge of the indomitable Wrath had ceased to resemble a place from which men commanded warships. It had become a charnel chapel dedicated to the inevitable failure of flesh. Half the command crew were dead. Some remained seated at their stations, held upright by harnesses, despite missing limbs or sections of their skulls. Others had been dragged aside and stacked against the bulkheads so their replacements could work. Blood ran through the deck gratings in warm streams, carrying teeth, fragments of bone, and strips of uniform toward the bilge pumps. Medici servitors moved among the living. One had opened the abdomen of the Master of Ordnance and pushed its metal hands into the wound. The officer's intestines had spilled across his lap when the bridge took its last direct hit. Servo clamps held the torn organs inside him, while cables ran from his spine into the targeting lectern. The man's lips were blue. He continued calling firing solutions. "Forward batteries have target," he gasped. "Enemy cruiser bearing 3 points to starboard. Range collapsing." "Fire," Yarrick said. The indomitable Wrath shuddered as its torpedo tubes discharged. The projectiles surged ahead in disciplined formation, each carrying a warhead capable of gutting a hive district. Point defense guns opened across the Orc line. Space became crowded with tracer fire, flak bursts, and tumbling interceptor craft. 2 torpedoes vanished. 3 more were crippled. The remaining warheads struck the kill cruiser amidships. The Orc vessel bulged before tearing apart. Its armor opened in layers. Internal chambers ruptured one after another, hurling buoys, Gretchen, engines, and ammunition into the void. The detonation consumed several smaller attack ships traveling beside it. The Imperial bridge crew did not cheer. There were too few men left with the breath. "Lord Commissar," said Captain Vortigern. The captain had lost his left arm and most of his face. A bandage covered the ruin from brow to jaw, already black with blood. He stood beside the command throne because sitting would have allowed him to die. The evacuation corridor remains open. Barely. The Black Templars are launching their final descent. The Fenrisian ships are following. Yarrick watched the hololithic display. Imperial icons flickered and vanished around Icaria. The enemy formation was closing like a jaw. Ghazkul's fleet occupied the center, where the greatest concentration of green light burned against the stars. "Order every surviving ship to attack," Yarrick said. Vortigern stared at him with his remaining eye. "My lord, our formation is broken." "Then the enemy cannot predict its shape. We have no reserves. Neither do the dead. The fleet will not survive another engagement." Yarrick turned toward him. His bionic eye glowed like a coal inside his scarred face. The soldiers of Armageddon had whispered that the implant could kill with a glance. Orcs believed it without question. Humans tried not to. "Captain," Yarrick said, "survival ceased to be the objective when we entered this system." Vortigern's jaw tightened. Understanding did not comfort him. "Helm," Yarrick continued, "take us into the center of their formation." The helmsman crossed himself over the aquila stitched into his coat. "At once, Lord Commissar." The indomitable wrath accelerated. Its surviving escorts followed. Cruisers with shattered armor and venting decks formed around it. Frigates trailing atmosphere turned their prows toward the Orc armada. Munitorum transports, emptied of troops and ammunition, increased speed and became weapons themselves. Across the fleet, commands passed through static-choked vox channels. Captains gave final absolutions. Confessors screamed blessings over open frequencies. Ratings locked themselves into stations from which they would never rise. Engine seers cut safety governors from reactor housings and begged forgiveness from outraged machine spirits. Then the Imperial formation entered the throat of the enemy. Macro cannon fire crossed the void. Shells the size of hab blocks struck the indomitable Wrath's prow. Armor buckled, decks collapsed. Thousands died between one heartbeat and the next. The impact hurled men across the bridge. A communications officer struck the ceiling and came down headless, his neck pumping blood over the tactical lectern. Yarrick remained standing. The power claw attached to his right arm had closed around a support rail. Its talons bit through the metal and held him upright while the world convulsed around him. "Launch the assault craft," he said. Vortigern spat blood. "Ground batteries will butcher them." "Yes." "The mesa is covered by half the Orc army." "Yes." "And Gazkul may not be there." Yarrick tore his claw free from the rail. "He is there." The confidence in his voice silenced the bridge. Gazkul Mag Uruk Thraka was many things. A beast, a prophet, a warlord whose victories had drowned systems in blood. Yet he was not a coward, nor was he careless. He would stand at the center of the greatest danger, because an Orc of his stature could do nothing else. Yarrick understood him. That understanding had killed millions. The first wave of Imperial assault craft plunged through Icaria's atmosphere beneath covering fire capable of erasing nations. Battleships fired upon the mesa until its upper surface disappeared inside overlapping explosions. Lance beams burned trenches through the rock. Bombardment shells struck with enough force to liquefy bunkers and throw entire mobs into the sky. Still, the Orc guns answered. Flak batteries filled the clouds with black detonations. Tracer fire climbed in burning walls. Crude rockets spiraled upward through ash and boiling rain, detonating among the descending aircraft. A Thunderhawk, carrying Black Templars, lost its wing. The gunship rolled once, its engines screaming, then struck another transport. Both aircraft disintegrated. Armored warriors spilled from the wreckage, their black plate burning as they fell. Some fired their bolters during the descent. Others struck the mesa hard enough to burst inside their armor. A Valkyrie opened from nose to tail. Guardsmen poured from it in flames. They fell through the smoke like burning offerings, striking the rocks among the enemy. Several remained alive after impact. Their screams ended beneath Orc boots. Yarrick's command lander followed them down. The pilot had no face. A fragment of canopy had taken it from him during atmospheric entry. His hands remained locked around the controls, while the servitor wired into the co-pilot station fought to maintain the descent. The cabin shook so violently that teeth broke inside men's mouths. Black Templars stood in the center aisle, maglocks securing their boots to the deck. Their armor was scarred, their tabards burned, their white shoulder plates grey beneath soot and alien blood. None spoke. A Fenrisian warrior stood among them. He wore a skull helm over his face, and black armor beneath a cloak made from the hide of some enormous beast. Bone charms and iron fetishes hung from his belt. He carried a crozius in one hand and a long-bladed weapon in the other. The skull helm turned toward Yarrick. "You have the scent of a man walking to his grave," the wolf priest said. Yarrick checked the power feed to his Baal eye. "So do you." A Black Templar marshal looked between them. "Graves are for those whose duty is finished." The lander struck the ground before any man could answer. The impact tore the pilot from his seat. His body folded around the controls, spine snapping, legs jerking as the cabin filled with smoke. One of the engines broke loose and smashed through the troop compartment, crushing 3 guardsmen into the wall. Their bodies became a single red mass beneath the burning machinery. Yarrick pulled himself from the wreck. The mesa was an apocalypse rendered in stone and iron. Orcs swarmed across its surface in numbers beyond sane calculation. Boys fired from crater rims. Knobs bellowed orders from shattered gun emplacements. Deaf dreads staggered through the bombardment with limbs missing, weapons blazing until Imperial fire reduced them to molten wreckage. The air itself seemed to roar. Bolters hammered, shooters rattled. Plasma detonations turned men into drifting vapor. Chainswords and choppers screamed against armor. The ground had vanished beneath corpses, shell cases, organs, and broken weapons. A storm of bullets struck around Yarrick. One tore through the shoulder of the guardsman beside him. The man spun, his arm departing in a spray of blood. Another round opened his belly. He fell, clutching loops of intestine as they slid between his fingers. Yarrick walked forward. His greatcoat burned at the hem. Blood ran from a cut above his living eye. The stolen power claw remained raised beside him, its crude orc mechanisms grinding with every step. The Black Templars advanced around him. "By his throne," the marshal shouted, "let none find us wanting." They hit the orc line with the force of a breaching charge. Bolters fired at arm's length. Mass reactive shells entered green bodies and detonated inside them. Torsos burst. Heads became sprays of bone and brain. Chainswords chewed through muscle, throwing ribbons of flesh across black armor. The Fenrisians fought with less ceremony. They moved like predators through a herd, striking throats, joints, and skulls. The wolf priest's crozius crushed an orc's face inward. He tore the weapon free and drove its winged head into another creature's chest, collapsing the ribcage around the heart. Yarrick passed them all. He saw Gazgkul through the fire. The warlord stood upon a slope of dead Imperials. Veterans of a dozen regiments lay broken beneath his boots. A Black Templar hung from one arm, armor split open from groin to throat. Gazgkul cast the corpse aside as though discarding an empty ration tin. He was immense, not merely large, not merely strong. He was a fortress fashioned from meat and iron. Armor plates thicker than tank hatches enclosed his body. Pistons drove his limbs. Cables crawled across a torso swollen with muscle. His skull rose behind tusks and scars, eyes burning with brutal intelligence. Gazgkul looked at Yarrick. The battlefield seemed to contract around them. "Still coming," the prophet of the War growled. Yarrick raised his power sword. "Still running." Gazgkul laughed. The sound rolled across the mesa, louder than artillery. "That's why you're the best one," he charged. Yarrick fired his Baal eye. The laser struck Gazkul's chest and burned through the outer armor. Metal ran molten around the wound. The warlord did not slow. Yarrick stepped inside the sweep of an arm, large enough to crush a transport. His power sword carved across Gazkul's thigh plate. Sparks and dark blood burst from the cut. Then the claw struck. Its talons slammed into Gazkul's chest. They punched through armor, tore apart cables, and sank into green flesh. Yarrick closed the weapon and pulled. A section of the warlord's breastplate came free. Metal screamed. Hydraulic lines burst. Blood sprayed across Yarrick's face, hot and thick. Gazkul staggered half a step. Half a step was more than armies had forced from him. Yarrick tore the claw back for another blow. Gazkul caught him. The warlord's hand closed around Yarrick's torso. For an instant, there was only pressure. Then his ribs broke. The first splintered beneath the greatcoat. The second drove inward through muscle. More followed in rapid succession, snapping like dry sticks inside his chest. One pierced his lung, another scraped across his heart. Yarrick felt organs rupture. Blood surged into his mouth. It poured over his chin and down the front of his coat. His power sword fell from fingers that no longer obeyed him. Ghazghkull lifted him from the ground. "Too little," the orc said. Yarrick's living eye remained open. "Close enough." He tried to fire the bale eye again. Ghazghkull drove his forehead into Yarrick's face. The impact fractured the Commissar's skull. His bionic eye burst from its mounting. Sparks sprayed from the socket alongside blood and translucent fluid. Yarrick's vision became a field of white pain, then darkness broken by emerald lightning. Ghazghkull released him. He struck the ground among the bodies. The warlord raised one iron-shod foot over Yarrick's chest. The boot was broad enough to cover him from shoulder to hip. Its underside was clogged with blood, mud, and fragments of bone. Yarrick tried to move. His body did not answer. Ghazghkull stared down at him. The orc grinned. "Not yet." The foot lowered beside Yarrick's head, crushing the skull of a dead guardsman instead. Bone fragments struck the Commissar's cheek. Then Ghazghkull turned away. The world began to collapse. Icaria's crust opened beneath the mesa. A fissure tore through the battlefield, swallowing tanks, infantry, and fortifications. Lehman Russ battle tanks slid backward into the abyss with their guns still firing. Orcs and humans clutched at one another as the ground vanished beneath them. The dead moved in rivers. Mud became blood. Blood became slurry. Thousands of corpses, severed limbs and wrecked vehicles poured toward the fractures. Wounded men screamed as the current dragged them against tank tracks and broken armor. The last Imperial survivors fled toward the extraction zone. Black Templars carried their wounded brothers. Guardsmen abandoned rifles and crawled over the dead. Fenrisians dragged men from collapsing trenches, only to see the earth split open and swallow them moments later. The wolf priest moved against the retreat. He found Yarrick beneath the body of the Black Templar marshal. The warrior's armor had been torn open across the back. His spine protruded through the wound, pale against the black ceramite. The priest rolled the corpse aside and knelt. Yarrick did not breathe. No pulse moved beneath his throat. One side of his chest had collapsed. Broken ribs pushed through his greatcoat. His ruined eye socket smoked. The priest placed a hand against Yarrick's neck. Nothing. Behind him, the final gunship descended through the fire. "Priest," called a Fenrisian warrior, "we leave now." The wolf priest reached for the power claw. Its talons closed around his wrist. The armor groaned beneath the pressure. The priest looked down into Yarrick's ruined face. His remaining eye was closed. His heart was still. Yet the claw tightened. The wolf priest laughed once inside his skull helm. "Aye," he said, "you are not finished." He lifted Yarrick and carried him toward the gunship. No report was transmitted to Imperial Command. No survivor saw the hero of Hades taken aboard. When the last gunship escaped Icaria's atmosphere, the official casualty rolls recorded Sebastian Yarrick among the dead. Astropathic choirs carried the message across the Imperium. On distant worlds, commanders lowered their heads. Regimental banners were draped in black. Priests proclaimed that the old Commissar had entered the Emperor's service beyond the veil. On Terra, the bell of lost souls tolled. Its voice rolled across the palace and through chambers vast enough to contain cities. The sound marked the passing of a hero. Aboard a Fenrisian strike cruiser, Yarrick's heart stopped. Medici servitors opened his chest. Metal claws held the shattered ribs apart. Blood pooled beneath him, almost black in the lumen light. The wolf priest stood over the corpse. He placed one gauntlet against the broken sternum. Armageddon still burns. For a moment, nothing moved. Then Yarrick's heart convulsed. Black blood surged through torn vessels. The medici instrument screamed. His remaining hand closed against the table, and the dead man began to breathe. Sebastian Yarrick returned to life beneath knives. The first sound to reach him was not prayer, nor the measured cadence of a medici cogitator, nor the voice of the skull-helmed priest who had dragged him from Icaria. It was the scream of a bone saw. The circular blade descended through the lumen glare, its teeth wet with his blood. Servo arms held his skull immobile, while the instrument carved away fragments too shattered to remain part of him. Powdered bone sprayed across the surgical screen. It gathered in the creases of the medici thralls' leather aprons and turned the old blood there into pale paste. Yarrick felt none of it as pain. Pain suggested distance between body and suffering. There was no distance left. He existed inside the agony as a dying man existed inside a grave. Iron clamps had been driven through his scalp. They held the skin peeled away from the crown of his head, exposing cracked bone and grey tissue beneath. One eye socket was empty. The other stared upward through a film of coagulated blood. A servo clamp entered the wound above his brow. Its pincers closed around a sliver of skull driven into the frontal lobe. The machine withdrew it with slow precision. A strand of brain tissue stretched after the fragment before snapping and falling against his cheek. "Cortical activity persists," intoned a servitor. Its voice emerged from a grill bolted across the lower half of its face. The creature had once been a man. Whatever name he had carried before the iron collar and memory excision had been reduced to nothing. "Persistence is not stability," replied the wolf priest. He stood at the head of the slab, skull helm shadowed beneath a hood of black hide. Ash from Icaria remained embedded in the grooves of his armor. Bone fetishes hung from his gorget, each marked with runes cut so deeply that the carvings resembled wounds. The priest spoke again in a tongue older than the Imperium. The words were harsh, formed deep in the throat. They carried the sound of stones splitting in winter and beasts calling beneath moonless skies. No lex mechanic translated them. None of the medici thralls appeared to understand. The machines did. The surgical rig lowered another blade. Yarrick's scalp was drawn farther back. The remaining fragments of his skull were drilled, trimmed and shaped. Plasteel plates, blackened by oil and engraved with Fenrisian runes, were positioned around the surviving bone. Rivets were heated until their heads glowed red. The first was driven into him. The impact shook his vision. The second compressed broken bone against metal. The third punched through the plate above his ruined socket and filled his mouth with the taste of copper. The fourth silenced his remaining heart. "Cardiac arrest," said the servitor. A mechanical fist struck Yarrick's chest. Broken ribs grated beneath the blow. Another servo arm injected stimulants directly into the exposed heart muscle. The organ shuddered. Blood moved again. The priest did not pause in his rite. Yarrick descended into memory. Hades' hive burned around him. The city had always stunk of industry, even before the orcs came. Promethium fumes seeped from the refinery levels. Chemical waste ran in open canals beneath Hab districts where workers lived and died without ever seeing the sky. The walls were kilometers of ferrocrete, adamantium reinforcement, and gun emplacements. The hive had been built to withstand invasion. It had not been built to withstand Hermann von Straub. Yarrick remembered the Overlord's command chamber. He remembered the silk banners, the polished marble floor, the perfumed air, and the map of Armageddon glowing above a table large enough to serve as an altar. Beyond the chamber, the hive shook beneath bombardment. The orcs had come in numbers that mocked reason. Their artillery turned night into a continuous dawn. Shells struck the outer walls every few heartbeats. Entire Hab towers collapsed. Tens of thousands died beneath each fall, buried so deeply that no recovery teams would ever reach them. Von Straub had blamed his generals. He had blamed the weather. He had blamed the labor guilds, the planetary defense forces, the Munitorum, and the Emperor's distant servants. He had not blamed himself. "Withdraw the western armor," von Straub had ordered. "The palace approaches must be secured." "The western armor is holding the evacuation road," Yarrick had replied. The Overlord's face had tightened with irritation. "The palace contains the government of Armageddon. The road contains 3 million civilians. Then they should have evacuated sooner." The memory broke beneath another rivet. Yarrick returned to the slab as the surgical rig drove plasteel through what remained of his skull. Blood ran into his ear. The medici thralls worked lower now, cutting open his back from neck to pelvis. The incision-exposed vertebrae fractured beneath Gazkul's grip and the violence of the final fall. Several had collapsed. Others had splintered outward, tearing muscle and severing nerve bundles. Augmetic calipers were lowered into the wound. The apparatus resembled the skeleton of a long iron insect. Jointed braces settled around the vertebral column. Hooked anchors pierced bone. Pistons aligned themselves beside the spine. The first bolt entered his upper back. The second fixed the brace to his pelvis. Additional supports were fastened around his ribs, shoulders, thighs, and knees. The machines did not restore what had been broken. They imprisoned the pieces in the approximation of a human shape. "Muscular degradation exceeds tolerance," said a thrall. "Replace it," ordered the priest. Vat-grown tissue arrived in steel trays. The muscle was red, slick and twitching, cultivated in chemical baths from genetic stock Yarrick did not recognize. Synthetic nerves lay coiled beside it like translucent worms. Donor flesh floated in preservation fluid, pale and hairless. The thralls cut away the dead portions of Yarrick's body. Necrotic muscle came free in black strips. A clamp tore ruined tissue from between his ribs, dragging fragments of lung with it. Another instrument scraped corruption from the wound until exposed bone shone beneath the lumen lights. The first graft was pressed into his chest. Needles entered it from every angle. Chemical sealant foamed around the edges, while the synthetic nerves were joined to living tissue. The graft convulsed. Its color darkened from red to purple, and from purple to black. Veins rose across its surface. The flesh swelled, split, and poured foul fluid into the open cavity. "Rejection," said the servitor. The stink filled the medici vault. It was the smell of meat forgotten beneath a furnace, cooked and rotten at once. The thralls cut the graft free. A second failed in the same manner. It died faster, liquefying while still held in the clamp. A third accepted the nerve links, then began growing teeth beneath its surface. The priest crushed it with the base of his crozius before the thing could mature. Yarrick sank again. Civilians ran through Hades' hive. The evacuation road had become a river of flesh, pressed between hab walls and abandoned transports. Men carried children. Laborers dragged the old behind them on cargo pallets. Priests shouted prayers through loudhailers, while Arbites fired over the crowd in futile attempts to preserve order. Then, the Orc bombardment struck the road. The first shell landed among the lead vehicles. The explosion overturned chimeras and hurled bodies against the walls. The second destroyed the rear of the column. Panic compressed everyone between the two burning impact zones. The crowd surged. Those at the edges were crushed against ferrocrete. Those who fell vanished beneath boots. Yarrick remembered faces disappearing below the moving mass and returning as pulped shapes in the blood. He remembered a man carrying his severed hand because he did not understand that it was no longer attached. Imperial tanks tried to force their way through. The drivers had orders to reach the western wall. Civilians climbed onto the hulls. Soldiers beat them away with rifle stocks. A Lehman Russ ground forward until bodies clogged its tracks. It continued moving, chewing men into red paste beneath its weight. Yarrick had arrived as the surviving officers argued over jurisdiction. He had shot the loudest one. The bolt from his pistol had entered beneath the man's eye and opened the back of his skull. Bone and brain struck the tactical slate in the hands of the officer beside him. "Clear the road," Yarrick had said. "Turn the armor west. Any commander who refuses will join him." No one refused. The armor held long enough for part of the crowd to escape. Most did not. Hades taught Yarrick that command was not the art of saving lives. It was the discipline of selecting which deaths purchased something. The surgical saw screamed again. The memory changed. War boss Ugelhard came through the breach, roaring beneath a banner stitched from human skin. The snakebite was enormous even by orc standards, his body layered in scars, fetishes and plates of hammered iron. Teeth and finger bones hung from his neck. A crude power claw enclosed one arm, its field flickering blue around blades stained with old blood. Guardsmen died before him. Ugelhard tore the first in half. He closed the claw around the soldier's waist and pulled until the spine stretched, snapped, and came free with loops of intestine. The upper half remained alive long enough to scream, while the war boss used it to strike another man. Yarrick met him amid the dead, his power sword carved through Ugelhard's shoulder plate. The war boss answered with the claw. Yarrick remembered the impact. He remembered seeing his own arm leave his body. The claw closed above the elbow. Metal blades bit through coat, flesh and bone. The power field burned the wound even as it opened. Blood sprayed across the guardsmen behind him, painting their faces and armor. His severed arm struck the ground, still holding its pistol. The men around him froze. Ugelhard laughed. Yarrick did not. He stepped inside the warboss's reach and drove his power sword upward beneath the creature's jaw. The blade passed through tongue, palate, and brain. Its tip emerged from the top of the skull in a burst of blood and grey matter. Ugelhard remained standing. So did Yarrick. He dragged the blade free, seized the warboss by the throat with his remaining hand, and cut until the head came away. The severed face continued twitching. Yarrick raised it before both armies. His blood ran down his side in sheets. The edges of his vision had turned black. Every beat of his heart emptied more of him onto the ground. "See your master," he had told the orcs. He did not shout. He had no strength for it. The nearest orcs heard, then those behind them. The fear spread faster than sound. Old Baali had lost an arm and killed the beast that took it. He held the head aloft until the enemy line broke and fled. Only when the last orc turned away did Yarrick permit himself to fall. The claw became his later. He had ordered it cut from Ugelhard's corpse and fitted to the stump. The Medici adepts called the act contamination. The soldiers called it justice. In the present, the orc weapon lay attached to his arm, while the Fenrisian surgeons rebuilt everything around it. A robed thrall examined the interface sockets, where crude Xeno's machinery had fused with Imperial augmetics and human nerve tissue. Systemic toxicity increasing, it said. Xeno's power pathways are discharging into the brachial plexus. Necrosis will continue. Recommendation, said the priest. Removal of weapon, amputation at shoulder, replacement with sanctioned augmetic. The claw moved. Yarrick remained unconscious. His heart beat beneath an open chest. His remaining eye stared blindly at the lumen bank. No command passed his lips. The claw opened. A surgical servitor turned toward it. The weapon closed around the creature's skull. Metal talons met bone with a wet crack. The servitor's face collapsed. Its eyes burst outward. Brain matter squeezed through the seams of its cranial implants and ran over the claw in thick grey strands. The body continued reciting diagnostics while standing headless. Removal inadvisable, the priest said. The claw released the crushed remains. No one proposed removing it again. The Baali required rebuilding. What remained of the old implant had fused inside the socket. The outer casing had burst under Gazkul's headbutt, driving metal and glass into the surrounding tissue. The thralls extracted the fragments one at a time, then widened the cavity with a drill. A new focusing chamber was inserted beneath the plasteel brow. It was longer than the previous assembly and reinforced with heat dissipation coils wound around the rear housing. A precision rangefinder was connected to the visual cortex. Targeting filaments entered the brain through channels cut in the skull plate. The final lens slid into place. "Power test," ordered the priest. The bale eye opened. Red light gathered at its center. A beam crossed the Medici vault. It burned through the surgical screen, leaving a glowing hole in the reinforced glass. It entered the face of a Medici servitor beyond. Skin vanished, bone blackened. The back of the skull erupted, scattering molten cranial implants. Across the wall, the beam continued through the bulkhead. Smoke rolled across the slab. Yarrick awakened inside it. His remaining eye opened. The bale eye dimmed from killing brightness to a steady red glow. He inhaled. The breath rattled through lungs that were partly his and partly not. The wolf priest stood over him. "You have been reforged," he said. Yarrick looked down at the braces enclosing his body. "By whom?" "Those who refused to let your saga end." That was not an answer. "No." Yarrick sat up. Pistons drove against fractured bone. Fresh sutures split along his abdomen. Blood ran beneath the augmetic braces and dripped from the edge of the slab. "Remain still," said the priest. Yarrick placed his feet on the deck. His knees locked under him. The calipers along his spine engaged with a grinding sound. Every nerve in his body seemed to ignite. He stood. The first step reopened the wound across his back. The second tore grafted muscle from one anchor point. The third carried him beyond the support of the surgical slab. He sounded like a machine dragging a corpse upright. The Medici vault's hatch opened. A ship serf entered carrying a tray of clotting agents. He was young by the standards of void-born laborers, though malnutrition had narrowed his body and aged his face. Radiation burns from Icaria marked his neck. He took one step into the chamber. His jaw split. The lower half of his face opened down the center. Bone bent outward. Teeth multiplied along new seams of flesh. A second tongue forced itself through the wound, long and black, tasting the air. The tray struck the floor. The serf screamed from both mouths. His fingers lengthened into claws. He leapt upon the nearest thrall and tore its throat open. Blood sprayed across Yarrick's rebuilt chest. The wolf priest raised his crozius. Yarrick moved first. The power claw closed around the mutant's torso. Its ribs broke one by one. The creature clawed at the talons. Its divided mouths shrieked. Yarrick watched without expression as the claw tightened and the torso compressed. Organs bulged through the wounds beneath the arms. One lung burst between the metal fingers. The abdomen split, releasing coils of bowel onto the deck. Yarrick continued closing the weapon until the spine snapped. He dropped the remains. "Is the vessel compromised?" he asked. The priest looked from the corpse to Yarrick. "Several serfs were touched by Icaria's storm. All have been contained." "Contained is not purged." "No." "Then purge them." The priest did not argue. He wiped blood from his skull helm with one thumb. "Armageddon faces another war." Yarrick turned. The motion was too swift. The new muscles obeyed before the old reflex should have completed the command. Gazgul. His wider hordes gather elsewhere. Another beast leads the immediate assault. Wazdaka Gutsmek, a speed boss. His warbands move toward Armageddon in numbers sufficient to drown continents. Yarrick retrieved his greatcoat from a hook beside the slab. The garment had been washed, but Gazkul's blood remained dark in the fabric. He drew it around the braces. "Then the wrong orc has mistaken my world for his." Later, alone in a cell prepared for him, Yarrick removed the coat and examined what had been made. His skin was corpse pale. Plasteel ridges showed beneath the flesh of his chest and spine. Sections of grafted muscle moved when he willed them, contracting with a speed and strength his old body had never possessed. He closed his living hand. The fingers tightened hard enough to crack the metal cup resting in his palm. Yarrick looked at the warped object. He did not remember taking it. He pressed 2 fingers against the flesh above his heart. Some scars were familiar, others were not. The tissue beneath them answered too quickly, drawing tight before the command had fully formed in his mind. His pulse was slow, but each beat struck with unnatural force. The wolf priest watched from the doorway. "What did you put inside me?" Yarrick asked. The skull helm revealed nothing. "What the war required." "That is not an answer." "No," the priest said again. Then he closed the hatch, leaving Yarrick alone with the body that bore his name. St. Joan's dock hung above Armageddon like a blade held over the throat of a condemned world. It was less a station than a continent of iron chained to the void. Armored bastions projected from its central mass in cathedral-like tiers. Macro cannon batteries occupied entire districts, their barrels extending into space like the blackened fingers of dead gods. Void shield generators throbbed behind walls thick enough to endure lance strikes. Shrine towers rose between defense emplacements, their stained crystal flex windows illuminated by banks of corpse candles that never went dark. Pressurized transit arteries connected the station's outer docks to its command citadels. Freight crawlers moved through them in endless processions, hauling munitions, fuel cells, replacement armor, water, preserved corpse starch, and men toward the waiting ships of Battlefleet Armageddon. Those men were measured by the million. Dock workers lived beneath the armor plating in warrens, where artificial daylight had never reached. Ratings slept beside coolant pipes, and woke when overseers struck the iron bars above their bunks. Servitor foundries consumed condemned criminals by the transport load. Entire bloodlines were born, labored and died within loading bays so vast that weather formed beneath their ceilings. The station existed to feed war. Now war was coming faster than it could be fed. The Fenrisian strike cruiser emerged from the warp, surrounded by frozen vapor and dying light. Its prow carried the scars of Icaria. Armor had been peeled away from one flank, exposing internal decks sealed behind emergency plating. Frost clung to the hull, despite the heat radiating from damaged engines. Battlefleet augurs found it and turned weapons upon it. Targeting beams touched the cruiser's armor. Torpedo tubes opened. Defense monitors rolled into firing positions, while naval officers screamed authentication challenges over the Vox. The strike cruiser answered with codes older than most of the station. The guns lowered. No message announced the identity of the passenger brought from its Medici vault. The cruiser docked against a military spur reserved for the Adeptus Astartes. Clamps large enough to crush hab towers closed around its hull. Transit bridges extended through clouds of vented atmosphere. Warning klaxons rolled across the embarkation decks. Hundreds waited beyond the pressure gates. Naval ratings stood in black uniforms beneath banners of the Imperial Navy. Dock overseers carried shock mauls and brass-bound ledgers. Munitorum clerks held rumors had preceded the ship. Some said it carried a weapon recovered from Icaria. Others claimed the Space Wolves had brought back the remains of an Orc prophet for interrogation. A rating near the front whispered that something dead was walking inside the transit bridge. The pressure gates opened. Cold vapor rolled across the deck. The wolf priest emerged first. Skull helm turned toward the waiting officials. Blood-dark runes marked his armor. Behind him came two Fenrisian warriors bearing axes across their chests. Then Sebastian Yarrick stepped through the smoke. For several heartbeats, no one recognized him. The man beneath the greatcoat was too pale. Plasteel braces showed at his neck and beneath the torn fabric at his wrists. The augmetic framework along his spine moved with a grinding rhythm, each piston forcing a body broken beyond repair to continue its march. His face resembled something recovered from a battlefield grave and rebuilt by an armorer. Fresh scar tissue surrounded one eye. Metal plates pressed against the skin of his brow. The bale eye occupied the other socket, its dark lens reflecting the dock's lumen strips. The Orc power claw hung beside him. Its talons were stained black. A dock worker made the sign of the Aquila. Another dropped to his knees. "That is not him," a Munitorum clerk whispered. The bale eye ignited. Red light gathered within the lens, bright enough to color the smoke. The clerk stopped speaking. Yarrick walked past him. The first man to say the name was a rating with burns across his face. Old Bale Eye. The words passed through the embarkation deck. Men repeated them to one another. Vox operators transmitted them without authorization. Dock workers abandoned loading stations to crowd the railings of the upper galleries. Servitors continued their labors while their human overseers stared. Old Bale Eye lived. The rumor outran every official communique. It crossed St. Joan's Dock through maintenance, channels, mess halls, gunnery decks, and slave warrens. It reached transit platforms where deserters waited among refugee columns. Men who had discarded their uniforms retrieved them. Ratings who had bribed overseers for passage off station returned to their posts. They did not return from hope. They returned because the thought of Yarrick seeing them flee was more terrible than the approaching orcs. One deserter forced his way through a crowd at Docking Causeway Helican, shoving aside labourers as he ran back toward his battery station. "Move!" he shouted. "Move, you blind fools! He is here!" "Who?" The deserter looked over his shoulder, as though the dead commissar might already be standing behind him. Yarrick. The crowd parted. By the time Yarrick reached the command citadel, St. Joan's Dock had begun to behave like a military station again. The command chamber occupied the heart of a shrine bastion overlooking Armageddon. Hololithic displays filled the air above a circular table. The planet turned beneath them, wrapped in storm bands and orbital traffic. Red threat runes multiplied across the outer system. Senior officers waited around the table. Admirals wore coats heavy with medals. Steel Legion colonels stood in ash-grey uniforms and black rebreather masks. Munitorum officials carried seals of authority suspended from chains. Representatives from several noble houses watched from behind armored glass. At the center stood Prefect Halbrecht Sorn. He was a broad man made soft by privilege. Gold thread covered his robes. His fingers glittered with signet rings. 2 servo skulls hovered behind him, projecting his titles in scrolling High Gothic. Sorn looked at Yarrick as one might regard a malfunctioning servitor that had entered a banquet hall. "This council is restricted," he said. Yarrick approached the table. "No longer." The prefect's nostrils tightened. "Your survival has not been authenticated." Yarrick placed the power claw upon the edge of the tactical table. The metal groaned. "Authenticated." No one volunteered. Sorn looked toward Admiral Falks, but the Admiral's attention remained fixed upon the red glow of Yarrick's eye. The prefect gathered what remained of his dignity. "While your reputation is acknowledged, Commissar, command of this theatre has continued in your absence. Decisions of considerable strategic importance have already been ratified. Armor formations have been withdrawn from Armageddon Prime." Sorn's expression changed by a fraction. "Several formations have been repositioned to the Corralis evacuation corridor. The corridor is essential to preserving planetary leadership. It leads to your private lander fields. The survival of senior governance is necessary for continuity of command." Yarrick looked around the chamber. Steel Legion officers avoided Sorn's gaze. One colonel's gloved hands tightened against the rim of the hololithic table. "How many tanks?" Yarrick asked. Sorn raised his chin. "The matter is covered by sealed Munitorum writ." "How many?" 6 Lehman Russ companies, 2 Chimera battalions, and elements of the Super Heavy Reserve. The words entered the chamber and poisoned it. Those formations should have been moving toward the surface war. Instead, they guarded a road from the prefect's palace to his evacuation craft. Yarrick's expression remained unchanged. "Repeat your order." Sorn frowned. "I have explained its necessity." "Repeat it before your officers. This is an attempt at intimidation." "Repeat it." The prefect looked at the assembled commanders. Pride compelled him where courage would not. "I ordered designated armor assets withdrawn from Armageddon Prime to secure the Corralis corridor and preserve the lawful government of the system. Yarrick removed his last pistol. Sorn lifted one hand. By authority of the Departamento Munitorum, I formally challenge your jurisdiction. You possess no verified mandate, no current seal of office, and no lawful power to interfere with my command. Yarrick shot him through the mouth. The lasbolt burned through teeth, tongue, and the back of the skull. Sorn's head snapped rearward. Fragments of jaw and white-hot bone struck the hololithic projection of Armageddon. Brain matter hissed as it passed through the image of the equatorial jungles. The prefect remained standing for a moment. Then his knees failed. He collapsed against the table, smearing blood across the controls before falling onto his back. One servo skull continued projecting his titles above the corpse. Yarrick holstered the pistol. Colonel Voran, a Steel Legion officer, straightened. Lord Commissar, return every withdrawn formation to Armageddon Prime. At once. Have the prefect's estate seized for the Munitorum. His household guard will be divided among the penal formations. Yes, Lord Commissar. Yarrick looked down at Sorn. Blood bubbled from the ruin of the man's mouth. One leg twitched against the floor. Leave him here. Admiral Falks blinked. My lord, the corpse remains in this chamber until the campaign is concluded. The Admiral glanced at the blood spreading beneath the tactical table. Decomposition will compromise the air recyclers. Then repair them. Yarrick turned his bale eye across the officers. You will conduct every council in his presence. You will plan every retreat and calculate every expenditure beneath the smell of his decay. When the flesh loosens from his bones, you will step over it. No one spoke. You will remember what retreat smells like. The hololithic display continued turning above Sorn's corpse. Yarrick began the inventory. The figures were recited by clerks and corrected by officers who understood that an inaccurate total might bring the last pistol out again. Steel Legion mechanized infantry remained the core of the planetary defense. Hundreds of Chimera companies survived, though many lacked full ammunition loads, and several existed only as names assigned to clusters of recovered vehicles. Lehman Russ squadrons were scattered across the hives, their variants ranging from standard battle tanks to demolishers, executioners, and punishers. Basilisk batteries occupied hardened positions across Armageddon Prime and Secundus. Their Earthshaker cannon could reach far beyond visible horizons, provided spotters survived long enough to transmit corrections. Hellhound formations waited near the equatorial jungles, promethium reservoirs full, and crews already suffering chemical burns from leaking seals. The Baneblade detachments were depleted. Some super-heavy tanks had fought through 3 wars and carried replacement armor cut from industrial machinery. Others had been stripped for parts to keep a handful of sacred hulls operational. One Shadow Sword possessed a functional volcano cannon, but could no longer turn left without assistance from recovery tractors. New Hippogriff armored fighting vehicles were being issued to selected formations. Fast by the standards of the Steel Legion, they carried enough firepower to cripple Orc transport columns while remaining light enough to maneuver through damaged hive arteries. Centaur reconnaissance vehicles had been assigned to artillery observers, command scouts, and forward demolition teams. The Navy retained fighter wings, bomber groups, and transport squadrons, although fuel rationing had reduced flight hours. Several Marauder formations existed only on paper. Thunderbolts had been cannibalized to keep lightning interceptors airborne. Scattered forces from multiple chapters of the Adeptus Astartes were moving through the system, but their commanders acknowledged planetary authority only when it aligned with their own oaths. Yarrick absorbed every figure. He asked about fuel. He asked about shell production. He asked how many chimeras lacked working rear ramps, how many basilisk barrels had exceeded safe firing tolerances, and how many tank crews had received replacement respirator filters. He did not ask how many men wished to fight. That number was irrelevant. The first explosion reached the command chamber as a vibration beneath the floor. A warning rune appeared beside St. Joan's outer cargo ring. Then another. Vox channels erupted. Hostile contact at supply elevator Primus. Defcoptus within the shield perimeter. Causeway batteries are not responding. Admiral Falk stepped toward the display. How did they breach the picket line? The answer arrived as picked feed. Orc warbikers raced along an external cargo causeway, exposed to the void. Their machines had been fitted with crude magnetic clamps and roaring thrusters. The riders wore sealed masks, fashioned from scavenged. Flight helmets, metal plates, and stitched animal hide. One dragged a naval rating behind his bike. The man's safety tether had wrapped around his ankle. He bounced against the causeway plating, leaving pieces of himself along the metal. His helmet had shattered. Frozen blood streamed behind him in glittering crystals. Defcoptas swept between the elevator towers. Their rotors should not have functioned in the vacuum, but crude reaction engines drove them onward. Rockets struck fuel conduits. One line opened and released a white plume of promethium vapor, hundreds of meters long. A second rocket ignited it. Fire rolled across the docking arm. The blaze became an expanding sphere, orange at its heart and black around the debris caught inside it. Workers vanished by the thousand. Some were burned. Others were hurled into space, still clutching tools and cargo chains. "Deploy the station reserve," Admiral Falks ordered. "Seal the inner arteries and reinforce the elevators." "No," Yarrick said. Falks turned. "My lord, the elevators connect the orbital armor depots to Armageddon Prime. The Orcs know that. Then we must hold them." Yarrick watched the attack. Warbikers fired wildly into loading crews. Defcoptas struck fuel lines and communications towers, yet their heaviest weapons were aimed at shield nodes rather than the elevator machinery itself. "They are not trying to destroy the supply route," Yarrick said. Colonel Voran studied the feed. "They are drawing our ships outward." "Yes." A fresh auger alarm sounded. Beyond the range of the outer defense ring, a larger Orc formation emerged from behind the station's moonlit foundries. Kill cruisers, ram ships, and transport hulks accelerated toward the departing armor convoys. The elevator assault was noise. The real target was the transport fleet. Yarrick pointed at the tactical display. "Redirect every surviving armor carrier toward Armageddon Prime." Falks stared at the burning causeways. Thousands remain trapped in the elevators. Tens of thousands. "We can evacuate them." "No." Yarrick touched a command rune. "Prepare explosive separation of supply elevators Primus through Quintus." The Admiral's face drained of color. "Those structures contain workers, ratings, and Munitorum personnel. They also contain the enemy. Their shields are still functioning. Then the blast will be contained." Falks looked at the officers around him. None offered support. Yarrick leaned closer. "Admiral, the Orcs are waiting for you to send ships toward the elevators. You will not oblige them." Falks swallowed. "Begin separation sequence." Warning sirens sounded across the cargo ring. Workers heard them inside compartments already burning. Men ran toward pressure doors that had sealed automatically. Overseers hammered on armored glass. Ratings screamed over the Vox that they remained aboard. Yarrick listened. "Charges armed," reported the station cogitator. "Detonate," he said. The elevators separated from St. Joan's dock in 5 simultaneous eruptions. Armored routes tore free from the station. Entire districts broke apart. Orcs, humans, vehicles and cargo containers spun into the void amid expanding clouds of flame. The trapped voices ended. The armor carriers changed course beneath the cover of the explosions. Orc ramships adjusted too late. Navy escorts opened fire and cut an escape corridor toward the planet. Yarrick watched until the last transport crossed into Armageddon's gravity well. Then he left Sorn's corpse beneath the rotating hololith and proceeded to the embarkation decks. Thousands of Steel Legion soldiers waited beside the landers. They wore ash-grey greatcoats, black rebreather masks, and webbing heavy with ammunition. Laser guns rested against their shoulders. Melter gunners checked fuel cells. Tank crews stood apart in oil-stained uniforms, while engines growled behind them. Yarrick climbed onto the loading ramp of his command lander. The soldiers turned toward him. He did not raise his voice. "There will be no rescue." The words carried through the deck vox. "No fleet waits beyond Armageddon to remove you from failure. No relief force will arrive before your ammunition is spent. No promise has been made concerning your survival." The men listened in silence. The orcs possess numbers. They possess momentum. They believe this world belongs to them because they have bled upon it. The power claw closed. They are mistaken. Yarrick looked across the gathered regiments. "You are not required to live. You are required to face the enemy. Every man who dies facing forward purchases the time necessary for another gun to fire." Some soldiers lowered their heads. Others tightened their grips on their weapons. "That is all the Imperium asks of you." The lander doors closed. Engines ignited. As the craft descended toward Armageddon, its vox receivers filled with orc transmissions. Thousands of crude channels came alive at once. Mobs hammered choppers against armor. Warbikers revved engines until exhausts spat flame. Gunners fired into the air. The sound merged into a roar large enough to distort the auspex. One name passed across the planetary war zones. "Bail I." The cry grew. "Bail I." On the command deck, an augur officer stared at his instruments. "Lord Commissar." Yarrick watched the cloud-wrapped world rise beneath them. "Report. We are detecting a surge in the Xenos psychic field, planet-wide. It began when our lander entered the atmosphere." The readings climbed. Green light flickered through the clouds. Across Armageddon, millions of orcs lifted their weapons and roared toward the descending craft. Yarrick's bale eye burned in answer. The Morphean line had been built 3 times and buried twice. Its oldest fortifications lay beneath the ash, entombed under the wreckage of wars whose dead had never been counted. Bunkers from the Second War formed the foundations of newer bastions. Trenches dug during the Third had collapsed into mass graves and been excavated again by penal laborers who found rusted laser guns still clenched in skeletal hands. The living defended themselves behind the dead. Corpse walls ran between the ferrocrete emplacements. Guardsmen had stacked orcs and humans together, packed the spaces between them with mud, then reinforced the remains with wire and shattered armor plate. Chemical rain had washed the blood from the upper layers, leaving flesh grey and swollen beneath uniforms and scavenged webbing. The rain fell without pause. It hissed against helmets, stained greatcoats, and pooled in the trenches as a yellow-brown slurry that burned exposed skin. Troopers stood knee-deep in it, their boots sinking into mud made from ash, blood, and the dissolved remains of men who had died before their regiments existed. Beyond the defensive line lay the orc-held ruin of Hive Tempestora. The hive rose from the horizon as a black wound. Its towers had been broken by orbital fire, but orc structures now clung to the remnants. Gun platforms jutted from collapsed spires. Smokestacks vomited oily columns into the sky. Crude glyphs had been painted across entire hab blocks in blood, rust, and industrial pigment. Yarrick watched it from the command cupola of a stationary chimera. The transport's engine idled beneath him. Its machine spirit growled through damaged exhausts, displeased by the corrosive rain dripping across its armor. The power claw rested against the cupola rim. Each talon was large enough to close around a man's skull. Behind Yarrick, the Morphean line extended for hundreds of kilometers. Forward trenches, secondary trenches, gun pits, mine belts, tank revetments, hardened command bunkers, ammunition vaults, rows of rusting Lehman Russ hulls, half buried as fixed emplacements. Millions of soldiers occupied the defenses. Millions more were moving toward them from Hive Tempestora. General Othmar Helbrecht stood on the Chimera's roof beside Yarrick. The general wore a rebreather over his face, though the rain had already eaten white marks into its black plating. His greatcoat was immaculate. His boots were not. "The line has depth," Helbrecht said. "We can hold the first belt until nightfall, withdraw by companies, and repeat the pattern at the second. Artillery will break the larger formations before they reach the inner works." Yarrick studied the Auspex display mounted beside the cupola. Green threat runes crowded the outer range. "No." Helbrecht turned toward him. "No, Lord Commissar. We will abandon the first belt." The general looked across the forward trenches. Penal legionaries filled them shoulder to shoulder. Explosive collars circled their necks. Overseers stood behind them with shotguns and detonation controls. That would surrender nearly 30 kilometers of prepared ground. Yes, the enemy would reach our secondary positions with most of its strength intact. No. Helbrecht waited. Yarrick pointed toward the forward line. "Remove half the ammunition from bunkers 4 through 20. Leave enough for a sustained engagement of 18 minutes. 18? No more." The general followed Yarrick's gaze. Understanding came reluctantly. "You intend the line to fail. I intend the orcs to believe they broke it." Yarrick indicated 3 narrow transit lanes running back through the minefields. "Clear those corridors for the Chimera battalions. Mark every turn with shielded lumen beacons. The infantry will withdraw through them after the forward bunkers fall silent." "And the penal troops?" "They remain." Helbrecht's eyes hardened above his rebreather. "There are nearly 200,000 men in those trenches. There are nearly 2 million orcs beyond them." The general lowered his voice. "Some of the penal formations have completed their terms of service. Then this will complete them." Yarrick climbed down from the Chimera. "Place demolition charges beneath every forward bunker, communication trench and revetment. Bury additional promethium cells beneath the corpse walls." Helbrecht followed. "The charges will require men to install them. Use engineers. And if the orcs attack before the work is complete, use prisoners." The general looked toward Hive Tempestora. Thunder rolled beneath the cloud cover. It was not thunder. The sound grew until the rain trembled upon every surface. Black shapes crossed the sky. Dakar jets emerged from the poisoned clouds in howling formations. Their wings had been assembled from mismatched plates, their fuselages painted red and yellow beneath layers of soot. Engines burned too hot, leaving trails of sparks and oily smoke. Guns mounted across their wings opened fire before the aircraft reached the Imperial line. The first strafing run cut through the rear trenches. Auto-cannon shells struck men in rows. Bodies came apart beneath the impacts. One trooper vanished from the waist upward, his legs remaining upright for a moment before folding into the mud. Another lost both arms and stumbled through the rain, staring at the blood pumping from his shoulders. Hydra batteries answered. Quad autocannons rotated toward the sky. Targeting cogitators screamed firing solutions through Auspex interference. The batteries fired together. One Dakar jet disintegrated. Its engine tore through the cockpit and carried the pilot's burning remains into another aircraft. Both machines spiraled downward, struck an ammunition depot, and turned several hundred guardsmen into a column of red fire. Then the orcs came across the ash wastes. The horizon moved. Boys advanced in mobs too large for unit designations to contain. Hundreds of thousands filled the open ground, shoulder to shoulder, weapons raised, mouths open in a single continuous roar. Black banners rose above them, each marked with crude glyphs and trophies stripped from Imperial dead. Battle wagons rolled among the mobs. Their hulls were layered in scrap metal, chains and spikes. Gunners leaned from turrets, firing heavy weapons without regard for the boys running beside them. Looted tanks crawled behind, their Imperial hulls mutilated by crude armor plates and painted glyphs. Killer cans clanked forward in packs, their engines coughing black smoke. Some carried saws, others bore drills, claws or scorchers. One had the upper half of a dead Steel Legion officer nailed across its front plate. Stompers came behind them. The walkers towered over the battlefield, immense effigies of the orc gods fashioned from iron, boilers, guns, and hatred. Smoke belched from their backs. Their feet crushed boys too slow to move aside. At the center of the horde, a vehicle resembling a moving furnace carried Big Mech Glitztooth. The mech's body was wrapped in tools, cables, and weapons. Half his jaw had been replaced with iron. The remaining teeth were plated in metal and sharpened to points. He raised a sparking staff. "Give 'em Daka!" he roared across the Orc-Vox. "Give 'em all of it!" The first Imperial guns opened fire. Heavy bolters hammered from the corpse. Walls. Streams of shells crossed the rain and struck the front ranks. Orcs burst apart. Torsos opened. Limbs spun through the air. Explosive rounds entered green bodies and detonated among packed organs. The mobs continued forward. They climbed over their dead and pushed wounded boys beneath their boots. Orcs with missing arms fired pistols from the ground. Those with shattered legs dragged themselves through the mud until following mobs crushed them flat. Yarrick watched from a secondary command bunker. His officers shouted range corrections and casualty reports around him. Vox speakers filled the chamber with overlapping voices. Forward Bunker 7 requesting ammunition. Warbikers entering Minebelt Helican. Stomper sighted on Axis Morphean Black. Basilisk batteries awaiting target confirmation. Yarrick touched the tactical display. Fire behind the first assault wave. The artillery commander looked at him. "Lord Commissar, the forward mobs are already within effective range. They are visible. The reserves are not." Coordinates passed through the command net. Far behind the Imperial line, Basilisk batteries elevated their Earthshaker cannon. Breaches slammed shut. Loaders withdrew. Commanders raised gloved fists. The guns fired. Their recoil shook the ground. Shells crossed kilometers of poisoned sky and descended behind the visible Orc attack. They struck the reserve mobs still emerging from Tempestora's outer ruins. The first detonation erased hundreds. The second threw battle wagons into the air. Bodies rose with them, tumbling through smoke before falling in pieces. A third shell landed beside an ammunition hauler. The vehicle vanished inside an expanding sphere of orange flame, and every orc around it became burning fragments. The assault did not slow. Warbikers reached the minefields. The leading machines disappeared in blasts of dirt and green flesh. Those behind used the wreckage as ramps. Engines screamed. Bikes leapt across craters and crashed into the foremost trenches. Steel Legion autocannons turned upon them. The weapons fired in disciplined bursts. Warbikers were cut from their saddles. One bike continued riderless through the rain, struck a bunker, and exploded against the firing slit. Chimeras reversed through the prepared lanes. Their rear ramps remained open. Dismounted squads fired from within the troop compartments as the transports withdrew. Lasbolts flashed through the chemical rain. Melter gunners targeted armor. Heavy weapon teams rode atop the hulls until bullets tore them away. A Stomper reached the forward line. Its belly gun discharged. 3 bunkers ceased to exist. Ferrocrete, guns and men were hurled across the battlefield. The walker stepped into the breach and crushed a chimera beneath one foot. The transport's hull folded. Burning crewmen spilled from the rear hatch, their bodies flattened beneath the next step. "Lascannon sections," Yarrick said. "Left knee joint." The order passed down the line. Beams of white light struck the Stomper's leg. Armor ran molten. Pistons ruptured. The machine staggered, yet remained upright. Again. More beams crossed the rain. The knee collapsed. The Stomper tilted slowly, like a cathedral falling. Orcs beneath it tried to flee. The walker struck the ground and crushed thousands into the mud. The foremost bunkers began to fall silent. Ammunition counters reached 0. Heavy bolters stopped firing. Penal legionaries looked back toward the retreat corridors and discovered that overseers had sealed the trench gates. They screamed over the Vox. Yarrick listened. He did not answer. Captain Morn abandoned Bunker 12 10 minutes before the ordered withdrawal. His company saw him leave through the rear hatch with 2 aides and followed. The movement exposed the right flank of the neighboring regiment. Orcs poured into the gap. A chimera waited beyond the trench. Morn reached it first. He tore open the command hatch and shoved the vehicle commander aside. "Drive!" he shouted. "Drive now!" Yarrick stepped from behind the transport. Morn froze. Rain ran across the captain's face. He had removed his rebreather. Mud covered his uniform to the waist. "My Lord Commissar," he said, "the position is untenable. You were ordered to hold for 10 more minutes. The bunker had no ammunition. You were ordered to hold." Morn looked toward the advancing orcs. "To what purpose?" Yarrick drew his las pistol and fired into the captain's back. The bolt struck low, burning through the spine. Morn collapsed into the mud beside the chimera. His legs jerked uselessly. Yarrick looked at the retreating soldiers. "Return to your position." No one moved. Morn attempted to crawl. Chemical water entered his mouth. Blood spread beneath him in a dark cloud. Yarrick raised the pistol. "Your captain has demonstrated the distance between cowardice and death. Do not force me to repeat the lesson." The soldiers turned back. They ran toward the bunker, while Morn drowned in mud and his own blood. The orcs reached the abandoned forward trenches. They flooded into the empty bunkers. Boys climbed over corpse walls and tore down Imperial banners. Nobs roared victory. Killer Khans forced themselves into communication trenches barely wide enough to contain them. Big Mech Glitztooth watched the line collapse through a cracked targeting scope. "Humies is running." A grot beside him laughed. "Corstay is boss." Glitztooth struck the grot hard enough to break its neck. "I knows dat." More mobs entered the trenches. Battle wagons packed themselves between the corpse walls. Orcs filled every bunker, revetment and tunnel. The forward line disappeared beneath them. Yarrick waited. General Helbrecht stood beside him in the secondary command bunker. "The retreat lanes are nearly clear," the general said. "Not yet." "The orcs have taken the entire belt." "Not yet." Another report arrived. "Enemy armor concentration at bunker complex Morphean Black." Yarrick watched the tactical display turn green. Thousands became tens of thousands. Tens of thousands became hundreds. He closed the power claw. "Now!" The demolition charges ignited. The forward line rose into the air. Ferrocrete bunkers burst from below. Trenches collapsed inward. Corpse walls detonated, throwing rotting limbs across the battlefield. Promethium cells ruptured and transformed the entire defensive belt into a sheet of fire. Orcs vanished beneath fountains of earth and blood. Killer Khans were torn apart. Battle wagons flipped end over end. One stomper disappeared into a crater as the ground opened beneath it, its guns still firing while it sank. The blast liquefied those nearest its heart. Green flesh became rain. Armor fragments crossed the battlefield like shrapnel from a god's grenade. A severed orc head struck the secondary bunker's vision slit and remained there, its remaining eye blinking. The detonation rolled for kilometers. When it ended, the screams began. Yarrick ordered the counterattack before the smoke cleared. Lehman Russ squadrons advanced hull to hull. Their battle cannon fired into the ruins of the forward line. Infantry moved between the tanks, firing through gaps in the armor formation. Chimeras that had been retreating moments before accelerated back toward the enemy. A retreat became an execution. Orders shifted across the command net. Autocannon teams abandoned aircraft targets and turned upon orc infantry. Hellhounds emerged from concealed revetments and poured burning promethium into the crater fields. Basilisk batteries altered their coordinates, walking shells toward the shattered reserve mobs. A surviving Nob reached Yarrick's bunker. It came through the smoke with half its face burned away. A two-handed chopper rose above its head. The weapon fell. The first guardsman was split from shoulder to hip. The blade continued into the second man, tore through his ribs, and opened the third across the chest. Yarrick caught the chopper in his power claw. The Nob snarled. "Bail I." Yarrick closed the talons. The chopper blade buckled. Metal shrieked. The weapon broke. The claw continued through the knob's hand, shearing fingers and palm into the mud. It crushed the wrist, entered the ribcage, and closed around the spine. The knob screamed until Yarrick severed it in half. He let the pieces fall. By nightfall, the Morphian line still stood. Nearly 1 million Imperial soldiers were dead or missing. Wounded men lay beyond the mine belts, calling for medici teams. Some begged. Others recited litanies until their voices failed. General Helbrecht requested permission to recover them. Yarrick refused. Orc reserves remain within artillery range. They are our men. They are audible. Helbrecht understood. The wounded continued crying through the darkness. Orc mobs moved toward the sound, seeking survivors. When enough of them had gathered, the basilisks fired again. The sealed inquisitorial report arrived before dawn. A black-robed observer placed it before Yarrick and waited while the Baelai scanned the cipher. Orc forces across Armageddon were changing direction. Mobs that had been assaulting refineries, transit hubs and supply lines were abandoning those objectives. War bands hundreds of kilometers away had begun converging upon the Morphian line. The estimated increase in enemy concentration was 700%. Yarrick looked toward the black banners gathering beyond the rain. The Orcs were no longer advancing upon Tempestora's defenses. They were advancing upon him. The hololithic image of Armageddon Prime turned above a table made from the armor of a dead Baneblade. Continents glowed beneath layers of tactical notation. Hive clusters burned as amber cathedral spires. Imperial formations appeared as blue sigils, Orc concentrations as crawling masses of green. Supply roads flickered where artillery had broken them. Fuel depots vanished and returned, as around the table, commanders recited the dead. 5 million confirmed across the Morphian sector, General Helbrecht said. A further 2 million missing. 3 regiments have ceased responding. The casualty bureaus believe... Casualty bureaus do not fight wars, Yarrick said. The general fell silent. Chemical rain rattled against the bunker roof. Each drop struck the ferrocrete with a faint hiss. Somewhere beneath the command chamber, pumps labored to keep the trenches from filling with poisoned water and dissolved flesh. Yarrick stood beneath the turning world. The braces supporting his spine clicked whenever he moved. His greatcoat concealed most of the framework, but not the hard metal ridges at his neck. The Baelai burned steadily within its reinforced socket. "Report losses that matter," he said. Helbrecht's rebreather hid his expression. "Lord Commissar, those were men. They were also boots, lungs and hands, all replaceable, provided the roads remain open. How many Earthshaker barrels?" The artillery prefect checked his slate. 219 condemned through wear. 87 destroyed by enemy counter-battery fire. 43 remain functional, but have exceeded recommended tolerance. Recommended by whom? The Departamento Munitorum. Then they remain functional. A clerk began entering the decision into the campaign ledger. "Fuel," Yarrick said. 31% of local Promethium reserves expended, replied Colonel Ren Varrick. Another 11% contaminated when the Orcs broke the Helican refinery line. Transport capacity? Reduced by almost half. Chimera losses are severe. Recovery crews cannot keep pace with the front. How many machines can still move? 4,600 confirmed. How many can carry ammunition? Varrick hesitated. Nearly all of them. Then transport capacity has not been reduced by half. The colonel looked toward the casualty totals floating above the table. The infantry need armor. The guns need shells. Men cannot advance without protection. Guns cannot fire without ammunition. A man may carry a lasgun cell. A chimera may carry enough cells to arm a company. Varrick's jaw tightened. Yarrick looked at him. Men are ammunition capable of carrying other ammunition. Do not mistake mobility for value. No one answered. An augur officer enlarged the eastern wastes. Green icons streamed through the ash beyond Morphion, moving faster than conventional armor should have permitted. Wazdaka Gutsmek's lead elements, the officer said. Warbikes, buggies, and light vehicles. Estimated arrival at Junction Corva in less than 3 hours. The transport nexus appeared as a cluster of blue lines crossing a narrow valley between refinery ridges. Roads from Hive Death Mire, the Morphian Line, and the southern manufactorums intersected there. Whoever held it could move armor across half the continent without crossing the irradiated salt flats. Yarrick watched the Orc runes converge. What defends the junction? Varric answered. The 18th Jopal, the 92nd, Hadron and remnants of the 7th Armageddon Line, combined effective strength, approximately 180,000. Armor? Minimal. 12 functioning chimeras. No tanks. Artillery? Portable weapons only. Time they can hold? Varric stared at the moving Orc icons. Against that force? Yes. 40 minutes. Less if the Speedoir reaches full momentum before contact. Then they will hold for 40. Varric stepped closer to the table. Those formations include veterans of the Third War. Then they know how to die usefully. The words passed through the chamber like a blade. The colonel removed his rebreather. His face beneath was lean and grey with exhaustion. A burn scar crossed his mouth, pulling one corner into a permanent sneer. With respect, Lord Commissar, you are ordering 3 regiments to destruction. I am. For a transport junction they cannot retain. They are not defending the junction. Varric looked again at the map. The industrial valley narrowed beyond Junction Corva. Promethium conduits from abandoned refineries ran beneath its floor, their routes marked in faded amber. Understanding entered the colonel's eyes. You mean to draw the Orcs through them? Yes. There are still maintenance crews in those tunnels. Add them to the regiments. Varric's face hardened. I object. Yarrick turned the bale eye upon him. Then you will command the line personally. Silence settled over the officers. Varric had intended protest as a moral statement. Yarrick had turned it into an assignment. The colonel replaced his rebreather. At once, Lord Commissar. He saluted and left. 3 hours later, the ash wastes began to shake. The doomed regiments heard the Speedoir before they saw it. The sound rolled across the flats as a continuous metallic thunder, too large to belong to individual engines. Dust climbed into the sky. The horizon disappeared behind it. Colonel Varric stood upon the roof of a command bunker overlooking Junction Corva. The bunker had once controlled refinery traffic. Its cogitators were dead, its communications mast replaced by a field vox array bolted to the roof. The valley ahead was lined with pipes thicker than hab-block corridors. Rusted towers leaned over the road, skeletal against the dirty sky. The men around him wore uniforms from 3 worlds. Jopal infantry occupied the central barricades. Hadron missile teams waited in the refinery ruins. Armageddon veterans held the road itself, their coats patched with armor cloth, their rebreather lenses dulled by decades of ash. Varric activated the Vox. All companies, stand ready. His voice traveled through helmets, bunker speakers, and vehicle sets. You have been ordered to hold this junction. He could have lied to them. He could have promised reinforcement or evacuation. Men fought better when they believed survival remained possible. Instead, he looked toward the rising dust. You will not be relieved. No one answered over the command channel. You will hold until ordered otherwise. You will fire until your weapons fail. After that, you will use steel. After steel, use your hands. A voice came through the static. Colonel, how long? Varric saw Yarrick's expression in memory. 40 minutes. The first warbikes emerged from the dust. They came at impossible speed, engines screaming beneath armor plates painted red, black, and yellow. Exhaust stacks spat flame. Riders leaned over handlebars, tusks bared behind crude goggles and metal masks. Buggies followed, bouncing across broken ground on wheels taller than men. Trucks carried mobs packed so tightly that boys hung from chains and welded railings. Gun wagons rolled behind them, turrets firing before targets entered range. Megatrack scrapjets skimmed over the ash like predatory machines assembled from crashed aircraft. Their nose drills spun. Rockets launched from racks bolted to their sides. One vaulted a collapsed pipeline and landed on an Imperial listening post, crushing the crew beneath its tracks. The Speedwar struck the forward pickets before the sound of its approach reached them. Men vanished under wheels. A warbike hit a Jopol squad at full speed. The lead soldier burst into red spray. The next disappeared beneath the front tire, his body wrapping around the axle. The bike continued through the formation, dragging limbs and entrails until its wheel well clogged with meat. Buggies mounted with saw blades entered the trenches. The first saw took a guardsman across the chest. His body opened from shoulder to hip, organs scattering across the men behind him. Another blade passed through 3 soldiers at waist height, leaving upper bodies sliding from severed hips. The road became wet. Ash and blood mixed beneath tires until the surface shone black-red. Vehicles skidded across pulped men, regained control, and accelerated toward the barricades. "Fire!" Yarrick ordered. The false defensive line ignited. Lasguns discharged in disciplined ranks. Red beams crossed the valley and burned into orc flesh. Boys fell from trucks with smoking holes through their chests. Others rolled beneath following wheels and vanished. Heavy bolters opened from bunker slits. Mass reactive shells tore riders apart. One orc's arm became green mist. Another shell entered beneath a warbiker's jaw and detonated inside its skull, hurling tusks and brain tissue across the bike behind it. Missile teams selected the largest targets. A crack warhead struck a gun wagon's front plate. The armor folded inward. The driver became a red-green smear across the compartment wall. The vehicle swerved, rolled and crushed a mob of boys beneath its weight. Melter gunners waited behind the barricades until the range collapsed. They fired into engines. Heat beams turned metal white. Fuel tanks ruptured. Burning orcs leapt from vehicles and ran through their own mobs, setting others alight before collapsing into the ash. Still, the Speedwar came. It did not attack as a conventional army. It spread, contracted, and surged according to instinct. The fastest vehicles raced ahead and died. Those behind climbed over their wreckage. Trucks rammed gaps in the barricades. Warbikes forced themselves into openings too narrow to pass, using the corpses of riders before them as traction. Yarrick watched the valley fill. "Fall back by company," he ordered. "Do not break formation. Keep them centered." The Jopal regiment withdrew first. They moved through prepared lanes while rear squads fired. Heavy weapon teams abandoned tripods and carried barrels by hand. Wounded men were left where they fell, unless they could walk. The orcs followed. That was their purpose. At the far end of the battlefield, Yarrick observed through a bank of picked screens. The command bunker shook whenever Imperial artillery fired elsewhere along the front. Officers stood around him, reporting the collapse in measured tones. Outer barricades lost. Enemy armor entering Junction Corva. Hadron left flank reduced to 30%. Colonel Yarrick requests indirect fire. Yarrick said nothing. The Vox filled with prayers. "Emperor, receive us." "Command, this is Jopal 3. We are surrounded." "Where is the artillery?" "Colonel, the orcs are inside the bunker." A scream cut through the channel. It became a gurgle, then the heavy chop of a blade striking flesh. Another voice replaced it. "Keep firing, keep..." The transmission ended beneath orc laughter. Yarrick watched green icons enter the industrial valley. A junior officer stood beside him, hands trembling around a Lord Commissar. "The 1st Regiment has ceased functioning." "Noted. The Hadron position has perhaps 6 minutes." "Noted. We can still trigger the conduits before the remaining companies are overrun." Yarrick looked at the tactical display. The heaviest orc vehicles remained outside the center. Not yet. At Junction Corva, Colonel Yarrick fired his last pistol into the face of an orc climbing the command bunker. The bolt burned through one eye. The creature fell, dragging two others from the wall. Below him, the last Armageddon veterans fought among the road barriers. Laser guns had overheated. Men used bayonets and entrenching tools. An orc drove a chopper through a sergeant's collarbone and into his chest, then stamped on the body to pull the blade free. Another bit through a trooper's throat and shook him like an animal until the neck opened. Yarrick checked the chronometer. 38 minutes. "Command," he said over the vox. "The valley is full." Yarrick heard him. "Not full enough." Yarrick looked toward the refinery road. Gun wagons entered the narrowest section. Scrapjets crowded behind them. Trucks rammed through wrecks, unable to spread outward because the pipe walls and ruins compressed them into a single mass. The colonel understood. He lowered the last pistol. 2 more minutes, he said. Confirmed. There was no anger left in his voice. An orc climbed onto the bunker roof. Yarrick shot it through the mouth. Another seized his leg. The colonel fell, striking the roof hard enough to crack his rebreather lens. He drew his power sword. The blade ignited as the orcs closed around him. At 40 minutes, Yarrick touched the firing rune. Buried igniters activated across the industrial valley. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the earth ruptured. Promethium conduits split beneath the road. Superheated fuel erupted through trenches, bunkers, and vehicle columns. The first wave of flame rose higher than the refinery towers. Imperial soldiers and orcs disappeared together. Men became black silhouettes inside the fire. Uniforms ignited. Skin blistered, split and peeled from muscle. Those who inhaled cooked from within, their lungs filling with burning vapor. Trucks became furnaces. Boys trapped inside hammered against metal walls while their flesh charred. Gun wagon ammunition detonated. Scrapjets were thrown into the air trailing burning fuel and dismembered riders. The river of flame raced through the valley. It entered trenches and poured over bodies. Wounded men lifted themselves from the mud, only to ignite. Orcs ran with their eyes boiled white, skin hanging from their arms in strips. Colonel Yarrick vanished beneath the first eruption. The last picked feed showed him on one knee, power sword driven through an orc's chest, flames rising behind both of them. Then the screen became white. 180,000 Imperial soldiers died in the valley. Nearly 900,000 orcs died with them. Yarrick watched until the casualty cogitators stopped counting. A shape emerged from the fire. The war boss was enormous, its armor fused to its flesh. Metal plates glowed against blackened muscle. One tusk had melted. Burning fat ran from its body in liquid sheets. It staggered toward Yarrick's forward observation position with a cleaver in one hand. The surrounding guardsmen recoiled. The war boss pointed at Yarrick. "Bail eye!" Yarrick's augmetic lens brightened. The beam crossed the smoke. It entered the war boss's face above the remaining tusk. The creature's head jerked backward. Steam burst from its eye sockets and mouth as the fluid inside its skull boiled. For a moment, the war boss remained standing. Then its cranium split. Cooked brain matter poured down its chest plate. The boys behind it stopped. They had heard the stories. Old Baal Eye could kill with a glance. It was not a weapon, they believed. It was hatred made light. Yarrick looked at them. They fled into the burning valley. Later, Mechanicus adepts sifted through the wreckage. They recovered navigation glyphs from a gun wagon whose crew had been cooked inside their compartment. The plates were scorched but readable. The mapped route did not end at Junction Corva. It continued toward Hive Death Mire, toward the orbital observatory called the Eyes of the Emperor. Its auger arrays could track fleets across the system. Its targeting relays guided orbital guns. Its command vaults coordinated reinforcement routes between Armageddon, St. Joan's Dock, and the wider war zone. The Wolf Priest stood beside Yarrick while the captured glyphs turned within the hololith. Green paths shifted across the planet. War bands were leaving refineries. Mobs abandoned sieges already close to victory. Vehicle columns altered course away from undefended supply depots. The priest studied the pattern. They are no longer coming for the hives. Yarrick understood before he finished. They are coming for me. The equatorial jungle was visible from orbit as a wound that had refused to heal. It girdled Armageddon in a band of poisonous green, vast beyond the scale of maps and regimental thought. Rivers wider than cities moved beneath its canopy. Trees rose like hive spires, their trunks swollen with chemical sap and their roots buried in soil enriched by 10,000 years of rot, blood, and industrial poison. Beneath them lived things that had never received names, because the men who discovered them rarely survived long enough to report what they had seen. During the season of fire, the jungle became an execution ground. Heat gathered beneath the canopy and remained trapped there. Moisture boiled from leaves. Vapor filled the lower reaches until men drowned while breathing. Pools of runoff turned acidic. Insects burrowed through rebreather seals to lay eggs in warm flesh. Metal burned beneath an ungloved hand. Ammunition cooked inside magazines. Imperial command had decided to cleanse it. The order contained no mention of preservation. Every root was to burn. Every branch was to burn. Every beast, fungus, settlement, spore, and hidden orc was to be reduced to ash. The fires would begin at the jungle's edge and advance inward behind armored formations until nothing remained alive between the northern ash wastes and the southern refinery zones. Sebastian Yarrick stood in the open cupola of a chimera as the first line of hellhounds advanced. Heat haze distorted the jungle before him. The trees seemed to bend and straighten like figures breathing in pain. Smoke already smothered the horizon, where preliminary bombardments had ignited the outer canopy. Armored bulldozers led the column. Their reinforced blades tore roots from the ground and crushed trees into tangled barricades. Some trunks were too thick to push aside. Engineers fixed melter charges to them, withdrew behind the vehicles, and watched centuries of growth explode into burning fragments. The hellhounds followed. Their inferno cannon projected sheets of liquid fire through the vegetation. Promethium clung to bark, leaves, and living flesh. The jungle resisted for several heartbeats, green walls sweating sap beneath the heat. Then it ignited. Fire crossed the canopy faster than men could run. The first wave of flame passed over the armor column in a roaring ceiling. Leaves blackened, branches split. Burning animals fell from the trees and struck vehicle roofs hard enough to dent them. Winged reptiles spiraled through the smoke, their membranes aflame, snapping at soldiers before dying. Steel Legion infantry advanced behind the tanks. Every man wore sealed rebreathers and ash-grey greatcoats treated against heat and chemical rain. Laser guns were wrapped at the breech against moisture. Flamers hung from shoulder harnesses. Each squad carried spore burners, drums of alchemical accelerant, and enough incendiary charges to turn a hab block into a furnace. Their orders were repeated across the Vox. Shoot anything that moved. Burn everything that fell. A wounded orc was to be burned. A dead orc was to be burned. A patch of blood-soaked soil where an orc had died was to be burned until the ground became glass. The orcs seeded worlds through death. Their bodies released spores into mud, vents, and stagnant water. Leave one corpse untreated, and a new infestation might rise years later beneath a settlement that believed itself safe. Nothing would be left untreated. Sergeant Cord ordered his squad forward through the ash. The men moved between blackened trunks while the hellhounds roared ahead. Visibility had fallen to several meters. Smoke turned the daylight red. Burning sap fell from branches in heavy drops, eating through cloth wherever it landed. Something moved beneath a corpse pile. Cord saw the shift too late. An orc commando erupted from beneath the bodies of 3 dead guardsmen. It wore strips of blackened cloth around its arms and had painted its skin with ash. One hand carried a serrated knife. The other seized the trooper beside Cord by the rebreather hose. The blade entered beneath the man's ribs. The commando pulled upward. The trooper opened from belly to sternum. His organs spilled against the orc's arm in glistening coils. He tried to scream, but the orc had torn the hose from his mask. Smoke entered his lungs and reduced the sound to a wet cough. Cord fired his laser gun into the creature's face. The orc's left eye burst. Its cheek burned away. It continued stabbing until 3 more shots opened its skull. "Burn it," Cord ordered. A flamer washed over the corpse. Then the trees moved. Commandos emerged from hollow trunks, drainage culverts, and heaps of burned vegetation. One dropped from the canopy with a wire loop already in its hands. The Garrote caught a guardsman beneath the chin and tore through the seal of his mask. The orc pulled. The wire sank through skin and muscle. Blood sprayed across the man's lenses. He clawed at his throat while the commando dragged him backward into the smoke. Another orc rose beneath a chimera. It had buried itself in ash and mud and waited for the transport to pass overhead. It drove a magnetic charge against the vehicle's belly and rolled aside. The detonation lifted the chimera from the ground. Its lower armor folded inward. The crew became pulp inside the compartment. The rear ramp opened under emergency release, and burning infantry stumbled out. Commandos fell upon them. A chopper removed one man's head. Another soldier was pulled behind a trunk, his screams ending in the sound of metal hacking repeatedly into bone. The attack spread through the column without shape or warning. Vox channels filled with isolated engagements. Contact beneath the hull. Something is in the drainage line. They are wearing our coats. By the throne, check the dead. Check the dead. Yarrick listened from the command chimera. He did not order the column to halt. Halting would allow the commandos to determine the battle's shape. The jungle favored patience, concealment, and fear. Yarrick favored fire. "Hellhound companies," he said. "Reverse weapons." The leading flame tanks rotated their turrets toward the infantry following them. Commanders hesitated. "Lord Commissar," one said over the Vox, "our own troops remain within the burn zone." "I am aware." The Inferno cannon fired backward. Promethium swept between the armored vehicles. Commandos vanished inside the flames. So did guardsmen unable to reach cover. Men burned against the hulls of their own transports. Some ran with their coats alight, colliding with squadmates and spreading the fire. Others dropped and rolled in ash, already hot enough to cook exposed skin. The surviving infantry kept advancing. Those who looked toward Yarrick saw him standing above the chimera's cupola, unmoving, while the fire reflected from his bale eye. The commandos withdrew deeper into the jungle. Imperial flamers followed them. Inquisitor Croyle arrived during the second hour of the burn. His Garralisk emerged through the smoke on many jointed legs, each one ending in a hooked metal foot. The creature moved with the rhythm of a hunting arachnid, stepping over wreckage and corpses without slowing. Plates of dark armor enclosed most of its body. Tubes entered the flesh beneath its jaw and pumped stimulants through a system of transparent veins. Croyle sat within a high saddle fixed between the Garralisk's shoulders. He wore a long coat, the color of dried blood. An inquisitorial rosette hung against his chest, partly hidden beneath ammunition belts and sealed canisters. In his hands rested the Jindari Tox Cycler. The weapon's clustered chambers rotated with a quiet mechanical click. Each contained a different compound tailored to Xenos biology. The barrel was narrow, almost delicate, but the guardsmen near Croyle gave it more distance than they gave the creature he rode. The Inquisitor brought the Garralisk alongside Yarrick's chimera. "You are losing men unnecessarily," Croyle said. Yarrick did not look at him. All losses appear unnecessary to the men suffering them. The commandos could have been isolated. They were. You burned an entire platoon with them. I did. Croyle studied him. Unlike the soldiers, he did not cross himself when the bale eye turned toward him. He watched the augmetic lens change focus. His gaze moved to the ridges beneath Yarrick's coat, where the cybernetic armature locked a dead man's shape into motion. The Inquisitor lifted a small Auspex wand. It passed over Yarrick's chest. Your cardiac rhythm is irregular. It continues. Your body temperature exceeds survivable limits. It remains insufficient to concern me. That is the concern. Croyle recorded the reading. The Garralisk clicked its teeth at the smoke. You walked from a vehicle after exposure that killed 3 men inside sealed armor, the Inquisitor said. Your synthetic musculature is responding faster than baseline human nerve transmission should permit. Then your baseline requires revision. Perhaps. Croyle looked toward the jungle. Or perhaps you do. The column reached the first settlement before midday. It had no official name in the campaign ledger. Its inhabitants called it St. Hadron's Refuge, though no record existed of a saint by that name. Several thousand laborers lived there among corrugated metal shelters built around an abandoned pumping station. The people blocked the road. Men in stained work robes stood behind mining carts and fuel drums. Some carried autoguns, others held tools. Children watched from the settlement's edge, faces covered against the ash. The settlement priest stepped forward. He wore a respirator patched with wire and wax. A wooden aquila hung around his neck. You cannot burn us, he said. Yarrick descended from the chimera. The priest looked at the power claw and swallowed. Our people have served the refineries for generations. We have given sons to the guard. We have paid the tithe. You were ordered to evacuate, Yarrick said. The roads are death. The jungle is also death. This is not cleansing. It is extermination. Yarrick looked beyond him. The shelters stood beneath trees thick with spores. Drainage pools surrounded the pumping station. Any one of them could conceal orc growth. Any laborer might carry contamination in his lungs or beneath his nails. You are correct, Yarrick said. The priest stared at him. Yarrick turned toward the Hellhound commander. Burn the settlement. Panic moved through the crowd. Men raised weapons. Steel Legion squads fired before they could aim. Lass bolts cut through workers. A mining tool fell from severed fingers. The priest opened his mouth to speak, and a shot entered his chest, leaving a smoking hole through the wooden aquila. The Hellhounds advanced. Prometheum struck the barricades first. The mining carts glowed red. Fuel drums exploded. Fire entered the shelters and consumed families where they hid. Men ran from the settlement with skin hanging from their arms. Soldiers shot them and burned the bodies. The pumping station ignited last. Its reservoirs ruptured beneath the heat, releasing chemical runoff into the flames. A cloud of toxic vapor rolled outward. Rebreather filters clogged. Several guardsmen clawed at their masks as their lungs filled with black foam. The column continued. By nightfall, the jungle had become a continental crematorium. Fire stretched from horizon to horizon. Burning spores burst in the heat like mines, coating tanks in green pulp. Orcs emerged from beneath the roots already aflame, their skins split and their eyes cooked white. They still fought. One charred boy seized a guardsman and bit through the man's mask. Burning teeth entered his face. Another orc ran headless for several steps after a heavy bolter burst removed everything above its shoulders. Ash filled the air. It came from trees, beasts, orcs, and humans. It clogged vents and weapons. Men suffocated inside intact rebreathers because the filters had become packed with the powdered remains of everything the fire had consumed. The weird boy appeared at the center of the burning forest. He stood atop a mound of blackened bodies, shaking beneath energies too great for his skull to contain. Green light poured from his eyes and mouth. Iron plates hammered into his head glowed around the rivets. Boys surrounded him, chanting, "Wah!" The word became a pressure inside human skulls. "Wah!" Guardsmen staggered. Blood ran from noses and ears. Men dropped their weapons and clutched their heads. "Wah!" The psychic detonation struck. A trooper beside Yarrick convulsed. His skull swelled beneath his helmet, then burst. Bone fragments tore through the men around him. Another soldier's eyes shot from their sockets before his head opened from within. The line collapsed. Yarrick stepped forward. Green lightning crossed the burning ground and struck him in the chest. His armature overloaded, pistons locked, plasteel braces burned beneath his coat, flesh blackened along his ribs. The smell of his own cooking body entered his lungs. He continued walking.
Remember, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Support helps.
The weird boy screamed. The psychic energy bent. Lightning that had shattered men's skulls curved toward Yarrick's bale eye. The lens brightened beyond red, turning white at its center. Targeting runes flooded his vision. Power surged through systems no longer connected to any functioning source. The weird boy's confidence became fear. "That ain't right." Yarrick raised the orc claw. "No." The bale eye discharged. The beam struck the iron plate across the weird boy's forehead. Metal. Liquefied. The orc fell from the corpse mound, with smoke pouring from its face. It remained alive. Fenrisian warriors seized it before the boys could recover the body. They broke its arms, chained its jaw, and dragged it behind the Imperial line. Mechanicus adepts surrounded Yarrick. Mechadendrites touched the scorched braces beneath his coat. Auspex units clicked and screamed. Binharic bursts passed between the red-robed figures. Croyle dismounted from the Garralisk. "Report," he said. A tech priest turned a face of brass and cable toward him. Augmetic output increased by 212% during peak Xenos recognition. Power source? Unidentified. Stored charge? Insufficient. External induction? No compatible field detected. Croyle looked at Yarrick. "The rise began when the orcs recognized you." Yarrick's flesh smoked beneath the broken coat, and ended when they died. The tech priest emitted a string of static. "Correlation exceeds acceptable coincidence." Croyle's expression did not change. "Correlation is not proof." He removed the seal every record. No duplicate copies. Any adept who transmits these findings without my sanction will be dismantled before interrogation. The captured weird boy survived until dawn. Croyle's interrogators fixed it inside a restraint frame, while a sanctioned psyker entered its mind. The orc thrashed, laughed, and bit through part of its own tongue. Green light leaked from the corners of its eyes. Images emerged through the psyker's screams. Gallows spaceport beneath black banners. Deathmire's defensive network fractured by speed and fire. The eyes of the Emperor surrounded by orc machines. Transmitters awakening. A message sent beyond Armageddon. Not coordinates. Proof. Proof that old Baal Eye lived. The sanctioned psyker died when the weird boy's skull split beneath the strain. Croyle watched the body fall and ordered both corpses burned. The firestorm cleared 3 days later. Imperial reconnaissance aircraft crossed the dead jungle beneath a sky the color of iron. Nothing moved below. Rivers had boiled away. Trees stood as black pillars in fields of white ash. The pilots saw the glyph from several kilometers above. Orcs had carved it into the jungle floor before the fires reached them. Trenches formed the shape of a peaked commissar's cap. A burning circle marked the eye. 3 hooked scars represented the power claw. Beneath the image, crude low Gothic letters stretched across the ruined land. Old Baal Eye lives. Yarrick studied the reconnaissance image in silence. Across Armageddon, orc engines were already changing course. Hades' hive had no horizon. Its ruins had swallowed it. Towers lay across the ash wastes, like the bones of murdered gods, their ferrocrete ribs exposed beneath armor peeled open by orbital impact. Hab spires that had once housed millions had collapsed into one another, creating mountain ranges of blackened stone, twisted transit rails, and compressed human remains. The upper levels had fallen through the lower. Manufactorums had become tombs. Temples had been buried beneath worker districts, and the worker districts beneath oceans of debris. Gazkul had destroyed the hive at the beginning of the Third War. He had not conquered it. He had erased it. The orbital rocks had descended through Armageddon's poisoned atmosphere, trailing fire. Some had been asteroids plated in scrap iron and packed with engines. Others had been hollowed moons filled with explosives, ammunition, and screaming orcs. They struck Hades with the force of extinction weapons. The first impact had broken the void shields. The second had flattened the palace district. The remainder had continued falling until the hive disappeared beneath fire, dust, and the pressure wave of its own death. Decades later, the ground remained radioactive. Vitrified bodies stood in the ruins where men had been caught by the heat. Their flesh had burned away, leaving skeletal silhouettes fused into walls and road surfaces. In the deepest transit tunnels, the dead had been compressed so tightly that the excavation crews mistook them for strata of pale stone. Yarrick's convoy entered the necropolis beneath a sky the color of old iron. Chimeras moved in single file through corridors cut between fallen towers. Their tracks crushed prayer tablets, spent shell cases, and human finger bones. Centaur reconnaissance vehicles ranged ahead, their crews sweeping the ruins with Auspex arrays and heavy stubbers. The Fortress of Arrogance had not yet been restored to service. Yarrick rode in an armored command chimera, whose hull carried the faded skull emblem of a regiment dead since the Third War. Inquisitor Croyle travelled behind him upon the Garralisk. The multi-legged beast stepped over wreckage with hooked metal feet. Its breath escaped through nostril valves in bursts of chemical vapor. Croyle sat within the saddle with the Jindari Tox cycler across his lap, and his attention fixed upon Yarrick's command vehicle. The wolf priest marched beside the convoy, rather than ride. His skull helm remained turned toward the dead hive. "Too many voices here," he said over the command vox. Yarrick stood in the cupola. "They are dead." "Aye. Then they have nothing to say." The priest's laugh carried through the static. "The dead always have something to say. The living are merely too loud to hear it." Yarrick looked toward the broken towers. He heard nothing. Then the memories began. Hades had possessed a horizon during the Second War. Yarrick remembered its walls standing unbroken beneath the Orc bombardment. He remembered defense batteries firing from the towers, their recoil shaking dust from the cathedral ceilings. He remembered the western approaches filled with tanks and infantry, all waiting for orders from an overlord who had already surrendered responsibility. Hermann von Straub had not fled the hive in body. That would have required courage. He had remained within his palace while abandoning every duty that made his survival valuable. He issued contradictory commands, dismissed officers who brought unwelcome reports, and moved armor from threatened districts to protect ceremonial avenues. When the ammunition crisis began, von Straub ordered the storehouse clerks to conceal it. Yarrick ordered them shot. The first clerk died beside a ledger falsified to show 2 million lasgun cells that did not exist. The second died after admitting that artillery shells had been diverted to a noble household's private bunkers. The third attempted to explain that the Munitorum forms had been completed properly. Yarrick shot him before he finished. Thereafter, the accounting improved. Every company received ammunition according to the value of the ground it defended, and the number of minutes that ground needed to remain imperial. Regiments assigned to the outer walls received less. Veterans guarding the macro-reactor approaches received more. Penal battalions were issued 1 power cell per man and told to take replacements from the dead. Civilians were pressed into labor formations. Men who had spent their lives tending refinery valves were given shovels and ordered to deepen anti-tank ditches under bombardment. Factory workers carried shells from underground vaults to gun batteries until their hands split and the bone showed through. The old were sent to sort salvage. Those too weak to labor were assigned to corpse clearance. Several districts refused. Yarrick sealed them. He remembered standing before the controls while warning runes flashed across the panel. Tens of thousands remained inside the hab sectors. They hammered on pressure doors and begged the soldiers beyond them to open the way. Some claimed orcs had already entered through the lower transit lines. Others swore the alarm was false. It did not matter. The districts lay between the enemy and the Defense Command arteries. Yarrick closed the blast shutters and ordered the ventilation systems purged. The pounding continued for hours. When it stopped, the sectors became fire breaks filled with corpses. The convoy halted. Yarrick returned to the present. A shrine occupied the ruins ahead. Its builders had raised it within the shattered remains of an imperial basilica. Black cloth covered the broken columns. Thousands of candles burned inside shell casings and human skulls. Pilgrims crowded the approach, their robes grey with ash and their faces hidden behind cheap rebreather masks. At the shrine's center stood an iron statue of Yarrick. It was 20 meters high and bore little resemblance to him. The sculptor had given it the proportions of an Adeptus Astartes, with the power claw raised above a mountain of orc corpses. The Baal eye had been fashioned from a red searchlight that turned slowly across the worshippers. Beneath the statue, priests displayed relics in crystal flex cases. A splinter of bone lay upon crimson velvet. Several teeth had been arranged around an aquila. Glass vials contained dark fluid, labeled as the blood of the savior of Hades. Another case held fragments said to have been recovered from Yarrick's corpse upon Icaria. Yarrick climbed from the chimera. The nearest pilgrims recoiled. Some fell to their knees. Others stared between the living man and the statue towering above him. The presiding priest pushed through the crowd. He was fat. In Hades, that alone was an accusation. His vestments were woven from expensive cloth. Gold wire circled his throat. Rings covered his fingers. 2 armed attendants walked behind him carrying polished autoguns. The priest looked at Yarrick's pallid face, at the augmetic framework beneath his coat, and at the Baal eye burning in its socket. Then he smiled. "A miracle," he said. Yarrick approached the relic cases. "Whose bone is this?" The priest spread his hands. "Yours, Lord Commissar, recovered after your holy sacrifice upon distant Icaria and returned to Hades by servants of the throne." Yarrick opened the case with his power claw. The crystal flecks shattered beneath one talon. He lifted the bone between the metal fingers. It was part of an animal's leg, polished smooth and stained with incense. The priest's smile weakened. Yarrick closed the claw. The relic cracked. Powder fell across the velvet. "My bones are occupied," Yarrick said. The pilgrims stared. One began to sob. The priest raised his voice. "Faith does not require literal substance. The relic's holiness lies in what it represents." Yarrick examined the food crates stacked behind the shrine. Munitorum seals marked them as field rations, assigned to armored formations at Morpheon. "Who authorized this allocation?" The priest glanced toward his attendants. "These provisions were donated by the faithful. They were stolen from tank crews. The shrine feeds pilgrims who travel great distances to honor your victories. Tank crews travel farther." The priest took one step backward. "You possess no authority over the ecclesiarchy." Yarrick drew his last pistol. The man's eyes widened. "I am the appointed keeper of this holy—" The shot entered beneath his nose. The back of his head opened against the relic display. Blood, teeth, and brain matter sprayed across the vials bearing Yarrick's name. The priest collapsed among the offerings, his robe spreading around him like spilled oil. The armed attendants lowered their autoguns. Steel Legion soldiers raised theirs. Yarrick looked at the surviving shrine officials. "Distribute every ration to the convoy's armor crews." One of them trembled. "And the relics?" "Burn them." A sound rose beneath the shrine. It was too deep to be prayer. The stone floor shifted. One of the attendants looked down as a crack opened between his boots. Green fingers burst through it. They seized his ankles and pulled. The man struck the floor hard. His autogun discharged into the crowd. Then his legs vanished into the fracture. He screamed as something below tore him downward. His pelvis caught against the stone. The pulling continued. His body opened at the waist. Blood flooded the crack. His entrails stretched after his lower half, before snapping and whipping across the floor. Orcs erupted from the tunnels beneath the basilica. The first came through the relic platform, scattering candles and bones. It drove a cleaver into a steel legion trooper's neck. The blade lodged in the spine, and the orc dragged the dying man sideways as it fought to pull the weapon free. Another boy pushed through a drainage opening, wearing the skins of pilgrims across its shoulders. It fired a slugger into the crowd. Men fell against one another, faces and chests bursting beneath the rounds. "Contact below," a guardsman shouted into the vox. The words were unnecessary. The shrine became a slaughterhouse. Laser guns were too long for the narrow passages beneath the basilica. Men tried to raise them and struck barrels against walls or the soldiers beside them. Orcs filled the confined spaces, their bodies blocking every retreat. The fighting collapsed into knife range. Entrenching tools split green faces. Bayonets entered throats and bellies. Guardsmen used rifle stocks until the wood and polymer shattered, then fought with the broken lengths. An orc seized a trooper by the jaw and pulled his mouth open until the lower half tore loose. The man remained alive, tongue hanging over the ruin, before another boy stamped his skull flat. A chainsword ignited in the darkness. Sergeant Cord drove it through an orc's abdomen. The teeth caught on the spine and sprayed minced intestine across the corridor. He kicked the corpse away and lost the weapon when two more creatures climbed over it. Yarrick entered the tunnels. The wolf priest followed, Crozius raised. Croyle remained behind with the Garralisk, sealing the surface exits and ordering flamers into every ventilation shaft. The first orc to reach Yarrick swung an axe at his head. He caught the haft in the power claw. The talons closed through wood, iron, and fingers. The orc bellowed as its hand became a knot of pulped green flesh inside the weapon. Yarrick drove his power sword into its mouth. The blade exited beneath the skull. He tore it free and opened the next orc from throat to groin. Blood and organs spilled across his boots. The creature tried to hold its belly closed with both hands. Yarrick kicked it aside. The passage narrowed. He advanced alone at its center. The power sword opened throats. It cut through jaws, shoulders, and stomachs. The claw crushed skulls and tore limbs from sockets. One orc charged with a metal shield. Yarrick punched through the plate, seized the creature behind it, and ripped it apart at the pelvis. Its upper body struck the wall. Its legs remained upright for a heartbeat before folding into the blood. The guardsmen followed the trail he made. They did not need lumen strips to know where he had gone. Every chamber behind him was carpeted with green organs. Severed heads lay in alcoves. Intestines hung from exposed pipes. Blood ran through cable trenches and steamed against damaged conduits. Ammunition ran dry. Laser guns clicked uselessly. Slugger fire ended as orcs emptied their crude magazines. The battle continued with steel, stone, and hands. A guardsman killed one boy with a broken brick, striking until the skull caved inward. Another wrapped a cable around an orc's throat and pulled while the creature bit pieces from his forearm. The wolf priest fought through them, laughing. His Crozius crushed an orc's chest into its spine. He dragged another close and drove his skull helm into the creature's face until tusks broke and bone collapsed. Yarrick reached the original command bastion beneath Hades. The door bore scars from the Second War. One indentation marked the place where an orc breaching charge had failed. Another showed where Yarrick had ordered a retreating lieutenant nailed to the metal as an example. The vault beyond remained sealed. Croyle arrived after the fighting ended. Blood covered the Inquisitor's coat, though none appeared to be his. The Garralisk followed through a larger maintenance shaft, its hooked feet clicking against the stone. The Inquisitor presented his rosette to the vault's ancient lock. It did not open. Yarrick placed his power claw against the manual wheel and turned. The mechanism screamed. Rusted bolts sheared. The door moved inward. Preservation systems awakened as they entered. Dim lumens flickered across cogitator banks, sealed beneath dust and radiation shielding. Data crystals remained in their housings, protected by systems forgotten by every commander who came after Hades fell. Mechanicus adepts connected power. The records returned. Hololithic images filled the vault. Troop movements from the Second War appeared above the command table. Orc armies spread across Armageddon in green waves. Imperial positions contracted around Hades. Yarrick watched Ghazghkull's decisions unfold. The warlord had possessed opportunities elsewhere. Refineries lay undefended. Supply arteries remained open. Several hives stood on the verge of collapse. Ghazghkull redirected forces away from them. Again and again, he moved armies toward Hades, toward Yarrick. "Strategically inefficient," said one of Croyle's savants. "No," Yarrick replied. "Strategically orcish." Additional records appeared. Captured Vox transmissions, interrogation extracts, behavioral projections, reports compiled after later battles. When Yarrick appeared upon a front, rival war bosses altered their plans. Some abandoned fortified positions. Others delayed attacks upon valuable targets. Mobs that had been fighting one another united for the chance to face the human Ghazghkull called his greatest enemy. Orc cohesion increased in Yarrick's presence. So did their predictability. Croyle moved toward a sealed archive at the rear of the vault. Its door bore the sigil of the Inquisition. Yarrick looked at him. "This was here during the Second War." "Yes. You knew." "I knew records existed." "That is not the same answer." "No." Croyle pressed his rosette against the seal. Hidden mechanisms opened. The archive identified itself in red high Gothic. Project Old Baal. The first file predated Icaria by decades. Yarrick read projections concerning Orc mythology, Ghazghkull's fixation, and the strategic value of preserving a single human icon. He saw contingency plans for false sightings, reconstructed Vox messages, and controlled dissemination of reports concerning his survival. Then he saw surgical schematics, his skull, his spine, his heart. The date stamps preceded his death. The reconstruction had been planned before Ghazghkull crushed him upon Icaria. The Fenrisian priest had not acted from instinct or mercy. Someone had expected Yarrick to die. Someone had prepared to refuse him permission. At the center of the archive stood a black case. Yarrick opened it. His own face stared back. The death mask had been cast in iron. It showed the ruined eye, the scarred brow, and the severe mouth. An inscription beneath declared Sebastian Yarrick fallen in service to the Emperor. Yarrick lifted it in the power claw. The fingers closed. The metal face caved inward. The brow folded. The cheeks split. The engraved declaration snapped in half. He dropped the crushed mask at Croyle's feet. The Baal eye brightened. "Tell me why the Imperium needed a dead man." Inquisitor Croyle did not answer. The red files of Project Old Baal remained open across the Hades command vault, their hololithic projections turning above the dead cogitators. Surgical schematics of Yarrick's skull, spine, and thoracic cavity passed through the Baal eye's glow. Dates stamped upon the records proved that men had designed his resurrection long before Ghazghkull broke him upon Icaria. Yarrick stood over the crushed remains of his own death mask. "Tell me why the Imperium needed a dead man." Croyle closed the nearest file. "Not here." The wolf priest shifted his grip upon the Crozius. The skull helm gave no hint of the face behind it. Yarrick's power claw scraped against the floor. "You mistake delay for safety." "I mistake nothing," Croyle said. "The answer is waiting above us." The Inquisitor turned and walked from the vault. Yarrick considered killing him. The last pistol rested beneath his greatcoat. The Baal eye held enough charge to burn through Croyle's skull before the Inquisitor reached the door. The Orc claw could crush the Garralisk, the rosette, and the man carrying it into a single clot of iron and flesh. Instead, Yarrick followed. The convoy emerged from Hades beneath a sky swollen with radioactive dust. Mechanicus crawlers had arrived while Yarrick explored the vault. They encircled an armored reliquary transport whose tracks had carved trenches through the ash. Red-robed adepts moved around it, their incense censers spilling perfumed smoke into the chemical wind. The reliquary doors were taller than a hab-block. They opened with the sound of a tomb breaking its seals. The fortress of arrogance waited within. Age had not diminished its brutality. The Baneblade's hull was a moving bastion of scarred adamantium and layered plasteel. Its main battle cannon projected above the glacis like an executioner's instrument. Beneath it, the demolisher cannon sat behind a reinforced mantlet blackened by ancient fire. Lascanon sponsons flanked the super-heavy tank. Twin heavy bolters occupied weapon mounts intended to butcher infantry formations by the company. Every plate bore the memory of war. Claw marks scored the left flank. A crater from a battle cannon strike remained visible beside the command tower. Armor sections carried different shades of imperial green, where battlefield repairs had replaced what orcs, traitors, and time had torn away. The name was painted along the hull in cracked white Gothic. Fortress of Arrogance. Priests had preserved the interior after Yarrick's reported death. No crew had been permitted to alter the command deck. The Commissar's tactical lectern remained beneath a dust cover. His command throne faced the same bank of Auspex screens from which he had once directed regiments across Armageddon. The vehicle had rejected every commander who attempted to claim it. Engines refused ignition. Turrets locked against their traverses. Targeting cogitators generated false range readings. One ambitious tank colonel had entered the command deck and found every hatch sealed behind him. He suffocated over 6 hours while the machine spirit transmitted his pleas across an open regimental channel. The Mechanicus declared the event a ritual incompatibility. The soldiers called it judgment. Yarrick approached the Baneblade. Croyle stood beside the forward track. Project Old Baal did not begin with your reconstruction, the Inquisitor said. It began with observation. Hades, Golgotha, every field upon which orcs changed their objectives merely because you stood before them. That does not explain Icaria. No, it explains why you were not allowed to remain there. The Mechanicus began the awakening. Oils blessed upon Mars were poured into engine housings. Incense burned around exhaust manifolds. Tech priests pressed electro-goads against access shrines and sent bursts of current through dormant systems. Binary prayers rattled from brass throats. Condemned prisoners were brought forward in chains. There were 12 of them. Deserters, ammunition thieves, and one artillery officer who had falsified barrelware reports. A robed adept opened each throat above a silver collection trough. Blood steamed in the cold air. Servitors pumped it through consecrated tubes into the engine shrine. The Baneblade drank, while the prisoners kicked and weakened. One remained alive after his blood had ceased flowing. A servo skull hovered over him and recorded the final movements of his eyes. A tech priest raised 6 mechanical arms. Ancient motive spirit, accept the libation. Sacred engine, remember thy purpose. Armored wrath, awaken and receive the enemy. The first reactor coughed. Black smoke erupted from the exhausts. Internal pumps hammered awake. Drive sprockets shifted by fractions, crushing compacted ash beneath the tracks. The battle cannon's loading mechanism cycled. The demolisher cannon opened its armored breach. Lascanon capacitors began drawing charge. Heavy bolter feeds pulled linked ammunition into their chambers. Auspex arrays rotated toward the horizon, while the command cogitators filled with targeting runes. The engine failed. Warning tones sounded across the hull. The senior tech priest emitted a burst of irritated Binharik. Primary motive spirit rejects ignition protocol. Yarrick placed one boot upon the access ladder. The Baneblade's engine turned over. Every system changed at once. The reactor output climbed through cautionary thresholds. The main turret traversed toward Hive Death Maya. Internal lumens ignited along the command deck. Locks opened before Yarrick reached them. Output at 117%, said an adept. Governor failure, replied another. Negative. Governor is functioning. Then the spirit exceeds limitation by choice. Yarrick entered the cupola. The command cogitator recognized the pressure of his gauntlet before he transmitted a code. Screens awakened beneath his hands. Old tactical files appeared. Crew stations unlocked. The fortress of arrogance growled. Steel Legion soldiers gathered around the reliquary fell silent. The Baneblade no longer resembled a preserved relic. Its engines shook ash from the armor. Weapon systems followed movement across the ruins. The searchlights burned through the radioactive haze. It had become what it had always intended to be. A fortress that moved. A weapon carrying the living image of a man whom the Imperium had declared dead, and whom the Orcs had never believed capable of dying. Yarrick opened the command vox. Crew stations. Tankers ran. The appointed commander climbed into the forward compartment. Loaders entered through the sponson hatches. Gunners strapped themselves behind weapon controls, still warm from the machine spirit's awakening. The Wolf Priest entered the command tower and stood behind Yarrick. Croyle remained outside. "You wanted an answer," the Inquisitor said over the vox. "I still do. Reach Deathmire alive." Yarrick closed the hatch. The fortress of arrogance rolled from Hades. An armored column formed around it. Lehman Russ battle tanks led in staggered files, their hulls scarred by the Morphean fighting. Chimeras sheltered between them, using the heavier tanks as moving walls against incoming fire. Steel Legion infantry watched through firing ports, while ammunition crates filled the footwells around them. Centaur reconnaissance vehicles raced ahead through the radioactive dust. Their crews wore sealed masks and carried long-range auger vanes above open compartments. Hippogriff armored fighting vehicles moved behind the scouts, autocannon and missile systems turning across the wastes. Basilisk batteries followed at a distance. They halted, deployed and fired in disciplined sequence. Earthshaker shells passed overhead with a descending howl. Before the enemy could calculate their position, the artillery crews folded stabilizers, engaged tracks, and displaced toward new firing points. Orc counter-battery rounds struck empty ground. The first shell opened a crater large enough to bury a chimera. The second landed among the tracks left by a basilisk battery and hurled radioactive soil into the sky. The third struck an ammunition carrier that had fallen behind. Its cargo detonated in stages, each explosion throwing burning shells into the convoy. The column continued toward Deathmire. Enemy contact appeared before the eyes of the Emperor could identify its center. Dust rose along the eastern horizon. Engines screamed beneath it. The Speedwire came through an ongoing artillery bombardment without slowing. Warbikes leapt from crater rims. Buggies passed between shell impacts. Trucks disintegrated, scattering boys across the ground, while the vehicles behind drove through the bodies. At the head of the assault rode Wazdaka Gutsmek. Big Reva was not merely a warbike. It was an argument against the laws of machinery. Armor plates covered engines stacked around engines. Exhausts rose behind Wazdaka like organ pipes, each coughing flame. Oversized guns had been chained to the frame. Wheels rimmed in serrated metal bit into the earth and threw corpses behind them. Wazdaka leaned into the speed. His armor was black, red and scorched iron. Cables entered his skull. A crude targeting lens covered one eye. The grin beneath it displayed rows of metal teeth. An Earthshaker shell detonated before him. The blast erased a dozen warbikes. Wazdaka emerged from the fire upon Big Reva's rear wheel, trailing smoke and pieces of other orcs. Infantry formations tried to redeploy. They never heard him arrive. Big Reva crossed the first platoon at full speed. Men became red mist beneath the front wheel. Wazdaka fired both guns into a heavy weapon section, reducing bodies and autocannon components to fragments. The rear wheel crushed a wounded soldier into the ash and dragged his entrails for 30 meters. A company commander raised his power sword. Wazdaka struck him with Big Reva's armored prow. The officer burst. His torso came apart across the handlebars. One arm remained caught beneath an exhaust bracket, the hand opening and closing as the warbike accelerated toward the next formation. Yarrick watched through the Baneblade's auspex. He opened 12 Vox channels simultaneously. Pardus Squadron, increase speed and advance 300 meters. Centaur teams, mark the second vehicle wave. Hippogriff batteries, cease fire upon infantry. Target transport axles. Chimera groups, Helican and Vortan, reverse formation. Lehman Russ demolishers, hold. Basilisk command, fire on designation Bale Black. Orders crossed and changed before officers completed their acknowledgements. Tank squadrons accelerated beyond safe engine limits. Chimeras moving forward reversed into prepared arcs, presenting frontal armor toward the Orc charge, while their rear ramps opened behind the Lehman Russ line. Infantry dismounted into cover without exposing themselves to direct fire. Hippogriffs concentrated upon marked vehicles. Auto-cannon shells shattered wheel assemblies and turned speeding buggies sideways. Following trucks struck them and piled into burning barricades. The basilisks fired upon the wreckage. The road vanished beneath explosions. A warbike formation broke west to avoid the bombardment. Yarrick had already moved a Punisher squadron into its path. Rotary cannons spun. Thousands of shells crossed the dust and reduced riders to shredded flesh. Demolishers, Yarrick said. Fire. Short-barreled cannon discharged at close range. Orc vehicles disappeared inside rolling walls of dirt, fire, and torn armor. Entire companies moved as though connected to Yarrick's nervous system. Formations changed purpose without withdrawing. Defense became advance. Retreat became envelopment. Scouts became artillery spotters. Transports became barricades, and crippled tanks became fixed gun emplacements before the enemy understood that the battle's shape had altered. Then the Stomper entered the column. It emerged from the dust behind a screen of trucks, taller than the refinery ruins around it. Its body was a mountain of riveted scrap. Cannon crowded one arm. A rotating saw occupied the other. Smoke poured from stacks along its back. Its first shot struck the Fortress of Arrogance. The shell hit the left sponson. Armor folded inward. The Lascanon mount vanished. 3 crewmen ceased to exist as separate bodies. Their remains coated the inner compartment in blood, bone, and steaming organs. The Baneblade lurched. Warning runes filled Yarrick's displays. Left track damaged. Sponson destroyed. Engine temperature critical. The tank commander looked back from his station. Lord Commissar, disengagement route remains open. Forward. The commander hesitated. The Stomper has range. So do we. Forward, Yarrick repeated. The Fortress of Arrogance advanced. The Stomper's saw arm descended. It scraped across the Baneblade's upper hull, tearing armor plates loose and opening the communications blister. A Vox operator was pulled through the breach. The saw caught him at the hips and scattered his lower body across both machines. The Baneblade drove beneath the Stomper's guns. "Demolisher loaded," called the forward gunner. "Fire!" The cannon discharged at point-blank range. The shell entered the Stomper's lower hull before detonating. Both machines vanished inside fire. The Stomper's interior opened. Burning orcs, Gretchen and engine components poured from the wound. One mech struck the Baneblade's cupola, with half its body missing. It slid down the armor, leaving a trail of blood and oil. The walker collapsed. Its weight struck the Fortress of Arrogance and drove the Baneblade into the ground. One track split. The engine compartment filled with debris. The command deck tilted until crewmen hung against their restraint harnesses. "Mobility lost," said the driver. Yarrick opened the cupola hatch. The wolf priest seized his arm. "The machine is dying. Then it requires assistance." Yarrick climbed onto the Baneblade's roof. The Stomper lay across it, armor ruptured and burning. Grots moved inside the wound, dragging cables toward the engine, while mechs shouted through the smoke. The surviving crew intended to restart the walker while it rested upon the Imperial tank. Yarrick entered through the breach. The first Gretchen turned with a spanner in both hands. His power sword removed its head. The second tried to crawl beneath an engine block. Yarrick drove the blade through its spine and into the deck. A mech charged from the smoke with a cutting torch. The flame washed across Yarrick's coat. His power claw closed around the orc's skull. Metal fingers tightened. The mech's eyes burst. Its jaw separated. Green brain matter squeezed between the talons and ran down Yarrick's wrist. He moved compartment by compartment. The power sword dismembered Gretchen attempting to repair fuel feeds. The claw tore open bulkheads and crushed orcs behind them. In the ammunition chamber, a knob swung a hammer against Yarrick's chest and cracked 2 augmetic braces. Yarrick caught the second blow. He wrenched the hammer away, seized the knob at the pelvis, and pulled. The creature split beneath the ribs. Its intestines spilled across the ammunition racks. Yarrick left both halves kicking. By the time Imperial infantry reached him, the Stomper's interior had become a furnace carpeted in green remains. They found the weird boy beneath the engine shrine. Its head had swollen to twice its natural size. Iron staples held cracks in the skull together. Green light pulsed beneath the skin. The creature whimpered whenever Yarrick drew near. Croyle interrogated it inside a mobile restraint chamber. Chemicals entered the weird boy through needles driven beneath its fingernails and into the veins around its eyes. Psychic clamps encircled its skull. Each thought triggered a discharge that burned flesh around the staples. Yarrick stood before it. The orc looked at his bale eye. Its fear became laughter. Blood ran through its broken teeth. "Use dead, bale eye," it said. "Dead on die inside." Croyle increased the current. The weird boy convulsed and laughed harder. "But Dewar knows your name, so your body don't get a say." The command vault beneath Hive Death Mire had been designed to survive the death of the city above it. Its entrance lay behind 3 adamantium blast doors, each opened by a different authority. Yarrick's command cipher released the first. Croyle's rosette unlocked the second. The third recognized neither rank nor office, only a sequence of Binharic pulses transmitted by a Mechanicus adept whose organic hands had been removed to prevent him from entering the code incorrectly. Beyond the final door, a lift descended through bedrock. No servitor operated it. No machine listened. The chamber had been severed from the Hive's command network before the delegation entered. Astropathic traffic could not reach it. Vox signals died within its walls. Even the laboring presence of the noosphere faded until the air felt empty. The selected commanders stood in silence as the lift sank. General Helbrecht remained rigid beneath his rebreather. Admiral Falks wore a void-sealed command coat and carried no ceremonial sword. 2 Steel Legion colonels watched Yarrick from opposite corners, each careful not to look too long at the rebuilt commissar's face. Colonel Ren Varrick stood among them. What remained of him had been extracted from Junction Corva after the Prometheum fires subsided. His right arm ended above the elbow. Half his face was hidden beneath a brass medici plate. The flames had fused his rebreather into his skin, and the surgeons had removed both together. Synthetic muscle pulled one side of his mouth into a permanent grimace. Burned lungs forced every breath through an augmetic grill at his throat. He had survived the sacrifice Yarrick intended to kill him. Neither man had spoken since. The wolf priest stood behind Yarrick, skull helm lowered, armor black against the lumen strips. Croyle waited beside him with one hand resting upon the holster of a needle pistol. The lift stopped. The doors opened upon a circular chamber plated in black iron. There were no devotional icons, no aquilas, no machine shrines. A single table occupied the center beneath a dormant hololithic projector. 12 chairs surrounded it, though no one sat. Croyle entered last. The doors closed behind him. Mechanical locks drove into place. "Nothing spoken here will leave this chamber without my sanction," the Inquisitor said. Varrick's vocal grill crackled. "Then why bring witnesses?" "Because the plan requires commanders." "Commanders require truth?" "No," Croyle replied. "They require sufficient information to obey intelligently." Yarrick placed the power claw against the table. The metal surface bent beneath its weight. "You have delayed long enough." Croyle studied him for a moment, then removed a black. He inserted it into the projector. Project Old Baal awakened. Armageddon appeared above the table, followed by Golgotha, Hades, Icaria, and dozens of lesser war zones. Green lines spread across each globe, marking the movements of Orc armies. Red indicators showed Yarrick's confirmed location at different points in time. The patterns aligned. Whenever news of Yarrick reached an Orc force, aggression increased. Mobs already engaged in battle abandoned defensive positions and charged. Rival war bosses suspended their feuds. Clans that had fought one another over fuel, loot, or prestige accepted common command. Orc migration accelerated toward fronts where Yarrick had been sighted. The image changed. Intercepted transmissions passed through the chamber in rough Orcish. "Baal eyes at de wall. Gazkul says that Humie's his. Any git what gets there first gets the best fight. Stop shooting us, you zoggin' runts. We's going to kill Baal Eye." The voices overlapped until Croyle silenced them. "Every major Orc formation exposed to your legend became more violent," he said. "More cohesive. More willing to subordinate itself to Gazkul's wider authority." General Helbrecht looked around the display. "Then the propaganda strengthened them." "Yes. Why continue it?" Croyle changed the projection. The same green lines appeared, but this time projected targets accompanied them. Refineries, defense batteries, Prometheum reserves, transit nodes, void shield generators. The actual Orc movements diverged from every strategically valuable objective. They turned toward Yarrick. Because increased cohesion was accompanied by increased predictability, Croyle said. They ceased measuring victory through territory, material, or survival. They measured it by proximity to Old Baal Eye. Admiral Falks watched an Orc fleet abandon an exposed orbital station to intercept a transport carrying only a false report of Yarrick's presence. "You baited them. We tested a hypothesis." "How many died?" Croyle looked at him. "Enough to produce reliable data." A new image formed above the table. It showed a crude Orc glyph, the peaked Commissar's cap, the power claw, and the burning eye. Around it appeared clan symbols gathered from worlds separated by thousands of light years. "To the Orcs," Croyle continued, "Yarrick is not merely an enemy commander. He is part of Gazkul's claim to supremacy. Their conflict has become a foundational myth. A war boss who challenges Yarrick participates in that myth. A war boss who defeats him may claim a portion of Gazkul's destiny." Yarrick watched the symbols gather. "An army conquers territory," Croyle said. "Your name moves wars." The words remained in the chamber after he finished speaking. Yarrick turned the Baal Eye toward him. "That is why I was rebuilt. That is why your survival was considered strategically necessary. I was not expected to survive. No." The wolf priest moved. Bone charms clicked against his breastplate as he stepped beside the table. "I found breath in you upon Icaria," he said. "Weak, broken, nearly gone, but present." Yarrick looked toward him. "You were ordered to recover me. I carried sealed instructions. From Croyle, his sigil was among them." "Among?" The priest rested both hands upon his crozius. Visions came before the battle. A one-eyed corpse walking beneath a sky of green fire. A wolf dragging iron from a grave. Armageddon burning while the dead man stood upon its bones. Helbrecht made a warding gesture. Croyle did not. "Fenrisian superstition," the Inquisitor said. The priest's skull helm turned toward him. "You relied upon it. I relied upon your obedience." "You had neither." Yarrick interrupted them. "You found me alive." "Aye. And then?" The priest's silence lasted too long. Yarrick's claw tightened against the table. "And then? We kept what could be kept." The hololith changed at Croyle's command. Yarrick's body appeared in layers. Skeleton, organs, augmetic framework, synthetic musculature. Areas of preserved tissue glowed white. Reconstructed portions burned red. Unidentified graft material appeared in black. There was more black than white. The Commissar studied the image without moving. His ribcage was a cage of plasteel, donor bone, and what remained of the original structure. Sections of lung carried no recognized genetic marker. Synthetic nerves ran beside biological bundles. A secondary pumping mechanism had been built around the damaged heart, though Yarrick had never been told it existed. The priest spoke quietly. Gazkul had broken you beyond any honest definition of healing. Your skull was open. Your spine had failed. Your organs were pulp. Keeping you alive required replacing enough of you that the distinction between preserving a man and manufacturing one became useless. What flesh? The priest did not answer. What flesh did you place inside me? The flesh that endured. That is not a source. No. Yarrick stared at the black portions of the projection. He thought of the grafts responding too quickly, the strength in his hand, his heart stopping and beginning again, the green lightning bending into his bale eye while the weird boy screamed. Croyle altered the display before Yarrick could demand more. Lines of psychic data appeared around the reconstructed body. The Orc Gestalt field does not function as soldiers claim, the Inquisitor said. It does not transform idle belief into unrestricted reality. An Orc cannot point at a stone, call it a gun, and make it fire. One of the Steel Legion colonels shifted uneasily. Then what does it do? It reinforces probability. It strengthens crude technology that should fail more often than it does. It sharpens instinctive coordination. It allows mobs to behave with unity they have neither trained nor planned to achieve. The projection showed engines running beyond their tolerances, weapons firing despite damaged feeds, and millions of orcs changing direction within the same narrow period. The larger the gathering, the stronger the effect, Croyle said. Gazkul's rise magnified it. Wazdaka's speedwar carries it like an atmospheric front. Yarrick looked at the image of his rebuilt body. And me? Unproven. You measured the surge. We measured correlation. When orcs recognized you, your augmetic systems exceeded available power. That does not establish cause. It establishes use. Croyle inclined his head. Yes. The word sounded almost respectful. Whether their collective fixation is sustaining your body remains beyond proof. Whether their fixation directs their armies is not. The projection expanded beyond Armageddon. Orc fleets appeared across neighboring systems. Some were fighting Imperial forces. Others were moving between worlds or gathering around Gazkul's wider empire. At the center burned a single projected course, toward Armageddon. Wazdaka will transmit proof of your return, Croyle said. His mobs already broadcast your name across every frequency they possess. The message will spread through traders, freebooter fleets, weird boy visions, and the instinctive currents of the Wa. Falx's expression hardened. You intend Gazkul to hear it. We intend him to find it impossible to ignore. And when he turns, the Imperium will be waiting. The hololith populated with Imperial strength. Battle fleets translated into projected positions around the system. Titan legions appeared upon the ash wastes. Space Marine strike cruisers entered orbital patterns. Astra Militarum troop routes converged in numbers that transformed regiments into statistical haze. Fleets, Croyle said. Titans, chapters of the Adeptus Astartes, billions of guardsmen, every gun that can be spared without collapsing another front. Helbrecht moved closer to the display. You would concentrate all of that here? Yes. Armageddon cannot support it. No. Supply chains will fail. Yes. The hives will become targets merely through their proximity. Yes. The general stared at the Inquisitor. You are not reinforcing Armageddon. Croyle met his gaze. No. The world above the table changed color. Hive clusters darkened one by one. Projected casualty figures appeared beside them. Multiple hives were marked for likely destruction. Continental transport infrastructure was listed as functionally unrecoverable. Civilian mortality projections climbed beyond the point where the numbers retained human meaning. Deathmire burned. Hell's Reach burned. Tempestora burned again. The equatorial jungle became a black band of ash. Most of the planetary population was listed as expended, displaced, or irretrievable. Armageddon was not being defended. It was being prepared. Varrick's breathing grill clicked louder. Treason. Croyle looked toward him. Against whom? Every soldier on this world. The colonel stepped into the hololithic light. The fire scars across his face shone beneath the projection. You sent my regiments into Junction Corva without telling them their deaths were part of an invitation. Men burned believing they were defending a road. They were defending a road, Croyle said. No, they were ringing a dinner bell. Varrick turned toward Yarrick. You knew part of it. Yes. You knew the line was bait. Yes. Did you know the planet was bait? No. The colonel's remaining hand curled into a fist. Then condemn it. Yarrick looked at Armageddon. He saw the factories beneath the hives, the labor populations, the armor roads, the trenches extending through ground layered with 3 generations of dead. He saw the world as he had always seen it, not as a home, as a position. It is treasonous, Yarrick said. Varrick's damaged face shifted. It is monstrous. The officers waited. It is strategically sound. Varrick took one step toward him. My men did not consent to this. Yarrick's expression remained still. No soldier consents to the purpose of his death. They fought for Armageddon. They fought because they were ordered. They believed. Belief does not alter expenditure. Yarrick moved around the table. The braces beneath his coat clicked with each step. The Imperium was built from lives spent without consent. Worlds were conquered by men who had never seen terror. Hives stand upon bones belonging to laborers who were never asked whether the walls deserved building. Every shell fired by the guns above us was carried, forged and loaded by hands whose owners possessed no authority over where it would fall. His bale eye settled upon Varrick. You object because the scale has become visible. The colonel said nothing. You survived Junction Corva, Yarrick continued. Did the men beneath your command consent to burn while you lived? Varrick's grill rasped. No. Did you order them to hold? Yes. Then you understand. I understand command. Command is the selection of useful deaths. Varrick looked at the projected casualty totals. For a moment, the chamber held only the mechanical rhythm of his breathing. Then he stepped back, not in agreement, in obedience. Yarrick turned toward the wolf priest. You did not save me. The priest faced him across the hololith. No. The answer contained neither apology nor pride. Yarrick looked again at the projected orc migrations, at the fleets that would turn when his survival became undeniable. He saw himself marked upon the map, not as a commander, but as a signal, a lure, a weapon shaped like a man. You loaded me. Aye. The words should have angered him. Instead, Yarrick studied Deathmire. Its defensive network remained strong enough to delay Wazdaka. Outer fortifications could be reinforced. Gallows spaceport could receive more armor. The eyes of the Emperor could direct orbital fire upon every approach. Those were the decisions of a defender. Yarrick no longer intended to defend. How quickly can Wazdaka reach the Hive Heart? He asked. Helbrecht looked up sharply. If the outer districts hold, several weeks. They will not hold. My lord, withdraw reserves from the eastern transit bastions. Leave enough artillery to make resistance credible. Falks understood first. You want him inside the hive? Yes. Croyle watched Yarrick with renewed caution. The purpose is to draw Gazkul, not surrender Deathmire prematurely. Wazdaka must believe victory is possible. His message must carry triumph, not merely discovery. Yarrick touched the hive heart. Permit him to take ground. Let every captured district broadcast its dead. Let the smoke rise high enough for his ships to see it from orbit. Varric stared at him. How many? As many as required. Yarrick shifted the western reserves toward hidden approach routes. Preserve the armor. Expend infantry in visible positions. Allow Gallows spaceport to appear vulnerable. The eyes of the Emperor will continue transmitting until the last possible moment. Croyle folded his arms. And where will you be? Yarrick selected the point where the greatest number of projected Orc routes converged. At the center. The Orcs may kill you. They have attempted it before. If you die before the message spreads, they will see me. The Baal Eye brightened above the map. They will hear me. Yarrick changed the command display from Imperial tactical notation to Orcish glyphs. His cap, his claw, his burning eye. When Wazdaka believes Armageddon is opening beneath his wheels, I will stand before him. I will speak Gazkul's tongue. I will name him coward before every Orc capable of receiving the transmission. The green roots tightened around Deathmire. The trap became visible. Not a wall, a wound left open by design. Yarrick looked upon the world the Imperium intended to sacrifice and made the plan crueler. Let Armageddon bleed, he said, but ensure the enemy sees every drop. Hive Deathmire did not possess streets. It possessed arteries. Armored roadways carried tanks through industrial districts where refinery towers climbed into the poisoned clouds. Transit tunnels descended through foundations layered with generations of workers, each buried civilization supporting another built upon its bones. Lift shafts plunged for kilometers. Manufactorums spread across entire districts, their furnaces fed by populations born only to labor and die beside them. The hive had grown without ever stopping to bury its dead properly. When the Orcs attacked, Deathmire opened all its graves. The first assault struck the outer walls beneath black banners and a sky diseased with smoke. Orc artillery walked across the battlements in overlapping waves, shells tearing ferrocrete from towers older than the regiments defending them. Steel Legion infantry fired from bastions whose ammunition lifts passed through ossuaries packed with the remains of workers killed during forgotten industrial purges. The Adeptus Astartes held the wall. Black Templars occupied the western breaches, their armor dark beneath ash and alien blood. Bolters thundered from firing steps. Mass reactive shells entered Orc bodies and burst among organs, turning the foremost mobs into a green-red mist that coated the warriors behind them. The Orcs climbed through it. They came with hooks, ladders, crude elevators, and piles of their own dead. Boys dragged themselves over the parapets with missing limbs. Knobs forced lesser Orcs ahead as living shields. Burner boys projected gouts of flame into weapon chambers until the men inside became blackened shapes fused to their gun controls. Castellan Severian stood at Breach Morion with one boot planted upon a dead Nob's chest. His chainsword had lost several teeth. Orc blood steamed across his tabard. 3 bolts remained in his weapon. "Martial command," a battle brother said over the squad vox. "Eastern wall is lost. Then the eastern wall is no longer relevant. Steel Legion armor withdraws toward the cloisters." Severian fired his final bolts. 3 Orcs died. The first lost its head. The second burst through the abdomen. The third fell from the wall and dragged 4 climbing boys into the depths below. "Withdrawal by squads," Severian ordered. "The Xenos will mistake discipline for weakness." The Templars retreated without turning their backs. Brother covered brother. Bolter fire passed over withdrawing pauldrons. Chainswords remained raised until the final warriors entered, prepared transit tunnels, and demolition teams collapsed the passages behind them. The Orcs reached the outer wall and found victory waiting. They roared. The sound reached Sebastian Yarrick within the eyes of the Emperor. The observatory occupied the highest surviving peak of Deathmire, its auger dishes and targeting towers rising above the hive's polluted cloud layer. From its command chamber, Yarrick watched the war expand through hololithic projections. Every district burned in a different color. The outer wall glowed green, where orcs flooded through the breaches. The cloisters remained imperial blue. Gallows spaceport flickered beneath constant assault. The industrial habs had become a field of conflicting signals as individual buildings changed hands several times within an hour. Millions fought beneath the turning image. Millions more waited behind locked hab doors. Military barricades sealed entire civilian districts. Men trapped inside hammered upon the gates, while Steel Legion soldiers faced outward. The defenders had been ordered not to open the way. Refugees would block the armor roads. Panic would consume ammunition. Hidden orc spores and infiltrators might pass through the screening points. The barricades remained closed. When orcs entered those hab blocks from below, the civilians discovered that Imperial fortifications resisted escape as effectively as invasion. Their screams passed through ventilation systems and joined the hive's greater voice. Yarrick listened to none of them. "Cloister's line reports contact," said General Helbrecht. He stood beside the central projection, rebreather lenses reflecting burning districts. The chemical rain had scarred his greatcoat beyond repair. His staff officers crowded behind him, feeding fresh casualty reports into command cogitators that could no longer display the dead quickly enough. "Black Templars are entering prepared positions," Helbrecht continued. "Armored elements are holding the refinery avenues." Yarrick enlarged the district. Lehman Russ squadrons fought between towers filled with volatile fuel. They advanced by sections, one tank firing while another reversed behind shattered machinery. Chimeras discharged infantry into manufactorum entrances, then blocked streets with their hulls. Every avenue became a firing lane. Every factory became a bunker. Steel Legion autocannon teams occupied loading gantries. Melter gunners waited behind smelting furnaces and fired into battle wagons passing beneath them. Basilisk shells descended through the hive's smoke, striking coordinates transmitted by observers who often died before confirming the impact. An orc gun wagon turned into Refinery Avenue Colne. 3 Lascannon beams struck it at once. The first opened the engine compartment. The second passed through the driver and burned into the troop bay. The third ignited the ammunition racks. The vehicle expanded. Armor plates flew through the avenue. Orcs emerged in pieces. One burning torso struck the side of a chimera and remained there, fingers clawing at the hull until the flesh blackened. "Cloisters can hold," Helbrecht said. "With the reserve armor, we can drive them back through the outer breach." Yarrick looked at the reserve icons. 6 Lehman Russ companies waited beneath the western manufactorums. Infantry transports filled subterranean staging chambers. Hellhound formations stood fueled and armed. They were enough to slow the assault, perhaps enough to stop it. "Hold them," Yarrick said. Helbrecht turned. "For how long?" "Until ordered." The general understood what the command meant. Beyond the cloisters, the hive heart awaited the orcs. It was not a single chamber. It was the hive's administrative and industrial core, a knot of reactor stations, command temples, guild palaces, transit nexuses, and hab towers constructed around the oldest surviving foundations. Wazdaka needed to reach it. He needed to believe Deathmire could fall. The first orc shells struck the hive heart before the outer wall survivors had completed their withdrawal. Big mech artillery emplacements opened from the ash wastes. Crude cannon discharged projectiles built from refinery drums, wrecked vehicles, and unexploded Imperial ordnance. Accuracy did not matter. Deathmire was too large to miss. A shell struck Habspire Delphion halfway up its eastern face. The tower leaned. Millions of tons of ferrocrete shifted above the street. Support columns cracked. Windows burst outward in glittering waves. Men filled the openings, trapped between the collapsing interior and the drop beyond. The spire fell. It struck 3 neighboring buildings on the way down. Towers broke against one another. Whole districts vanished beneath rolling dust and masonry. Thousands were crushed without seeing what killed them. Others survived in pockets beneath the ruins, pinned among bodies and broken pipes, while chemical fires consumed the available air. A second shell landed within the transit plaza. The road lifted like fabric caught by wind. Tanks overturned. Infantry disappeared beneath slabs of ferrocrete. A Steel Legion company was buried so completely that its Vox signal continued transmitting from beneath the street after every member had died. The artillery opened a breach through the Heart's outer bastions. Boys entered. They dragged wounded defenders from the rubble and butchered them in sight of the barricades. One orc pulled a guardsman apart by the legs. Another cut heads from the fallen and tied them to its belt, while the mouths still moved. Black banners rose over the breach. Wazdaka's glyph burned upon them. Yarrick watched green icons multiply inside the hive heart. "Release the reserve," Helbrecht said. "No. They have passed the outer defense." "Yes. We possess a firing solution through Avenue Primus. Armored advance now would divide the assault." "No." The general's voice lowered. "Every minute costs tens of thousands. They are purchasing depth." The doors to the command chamber opened. Colonel Wren. Varric entered without permission. His augmetic breathing grill rasped beneath the brass plate covering half his face. The sleeve of his coat had been pinned over the stump of his right arm. In his remaining hand, he carried a command slate bearing Yarrick's sealed deployment orders. The guardsman at the door looked toward Yarrick. He motioned them aside. Varric crossed the chamber. "You delayed the Western Reserve." "Yes." "The armor commanders received orders to remain in staging vaults while the Hive Heart defense collapsed." "Yes." "They possess ammunition, fuel, and clear transit routes." "Yes." Varric threw the slate onto the table. "Then this is not necessity. It is murder." Yarrick examined the tactical projection rather than the colonel. "Murder requires illegality. Do not hide behind language. I conceal nothing. Men are dying because you need the orcs to believe they are winning." "Yes." Helbrecht stepped between them. "Colonel, return to your command." Varric did not look at him. "My regiment died at Junction Corva for this. Now the Hive Heart is being spent for the same purpose." "It is," Yarrick said. "How much of the city will you surrender?" "As much as required. Every commander in this hive was ordered to defend it. Commanders who save every district lose planets." Yarrick turned the bale eye upon him. "Commanders who spend districts may kill empires." Varric's grill hissed. "And the men inside them?" "Already spent." The answer struck harder than a shout. Varric's remaining hand tightened. For an instant, every officer in the chamber expected him to reach for his weapon. He did not. A warning rune appeared over the command vox. Lieutenant General Maran Vey had entered an unauthorized encryption channel. Helbrecht touched the display. "What is he transmitting?" A communications officer read the cipher stream. "Records from Project Old Bale, deployment orders, casualty projections. He has addressed the packet to St. Jowen's Dock, the Ecclesiarchy, and Segmentum Command." Yarrick drew his last pistol. Vey turned from the Vox console. He was an old officer with medals across his chest and tears running down his face. "They must know," he said. "The regiments must know what this is." Yarrick crossed the chamber. Vey reached for the transmission control. "The Emperor judges—" The lasbolt struck the side of his head. Half his skull disappeared. Bone and brain sprayed across the Vox panel. Vey fell forward, his face striking the controls. Blood ran between the transmission keys, while his fingers continued twitching against the console. The communications officer stared at the corpse. "Message encryption is incomplete." "Remove him," Yarrick said. 2 guardsmen dragged Vey away. Part of his scalp remained stuck to the console. Yarrick examined the unfinished transmission. "Complete it." Helbrecht looked at him. "My lord?" Replace the files with casualty reports. State that the Hive Heart defense is collapsing despite full reinforcement. Include pics of the dead. The communications officer swallowed. To the same recipients? To every recipient. The false message departed. Above them, the Hive Heart died by rooms. The fighting lasted for days. Orcs entered command temples through sewage conduits. Guardsmen fought from archives, shrines, and corpse processing plants. Ammunition disappeared. Lasgun power packs were recharged in open furnaces until they exploded in soldiers' hands. Room-to-room combat reduced formations to mobs. Bayonets struck through doorways. Choppers opened men from collar to hip. Heavy bolters fired inside corridors and turned bodies into paste against the walls. Orcs used severed human limbs as clubs after losing their weapons. Soldiers fought with broken rifles, pipes, and sharpened pieces of masonry. Ventilation shafts filled with corpses. Men crawled through them to escape the orcs and suffocated between bodies already wedged inside. Blood flooded lift wells until maintenance platforms moved through dark red pools, carrying fingers, teeth, and scraps of uniform. The final holdouts gathered inside the Heart's reactor chapel. They built barricades from dead orcs and ammunition crates. A regimental preacher led them in the litany of endurance, while the doors shook beneath repeated impacts. When the orcs broke through, the defenders fired until the air became unbreathable. The last picked feed showed boys climbing across a mountain of corpses. The preacher struck one with the pole of his aquila. A chopper entered his stomach and emerged through his spine. The feed ended. Black banners rose from the Hive Heart. Orcs built towers over the dead, piling bodies into foundations and driving iron poles through the remains. Severed heads decorated every level. Fires burned beneath them, cooking flesh until fat ran into the streets. Gallows spaceport fell before the reserve moved. Wazdaka's warbikers entered through freight conduits, while Defcoptas attacked landing platforms from above. Fuel bunkers exploded. Imperial transports burned upon their pads. Ratings were dragged behind bikes along the runways until little remained, but arms tied to cables. The final control tower transmitted for 17 minutes after the orcs entered. Its last message contained no words, only gunfire, laughter, and a man screaming while something soared through him. The loss severed Deathmire's quickest reinforcement route. The bulk of surviving Imperial strength remained outside the city. The orcs held the Hive Heart and Gallows spaceport, but they had spent enough blood to make further advance uncertain. Neither side possessed the strength to claim complete victory. Deathmire had become what Yarrick intended, a wound neither army could abandon. "Release the reserves," he said. The western staging vaults opened. Lehman Rust tanks advanced into the cloister's hull to hull. Punisher cannons stripped orcs from plazas in waves of torn flesh. Demolishers fired into captured manufactorums and buried entire mobs beneath the buildings they had seized. Hellhounds burned through the outer battle zones. Chimeras delivered Steel Legion squads behind orc lines. Infantry fired between the tanks, withdrew behind moving armor, and reappeared in streets the enemy believed empty. The Black Templars counterattacked from the cloisters. Castellan Severian led them through a breach filled with dead from both species. "By bolt, by blade, by the throne," he voxed. "Drive them into their filth." The Astartes struck the orc flank. Chainswords opened green bodies. Power weapons shattered knobs inside their armor. The Templars did not attempt to retake the Hive Heart. They took enough ground to prevent its defenders from advancing. The battle settled into deadlock. Imperial officers called it endurance. The orcs called it a better fight. Yarrick called it sufficient. He seized every functioning transmitter in Deathmire. The eyes of the Emperor redirected its auger arrays. Hive Vox towers abandoned military traffic. Surviving spaceport relays, civilian announcement systems, and orbital beacon channels aligned beneath a single command code. Yarrick stood before the primary transmitter. Croyle watched from the shadows. The wolf priest remained beside the door. Varric stood behind the command officers, his scarred face unreadable. A red rune confirmed planetary transmission. Yarrick spoke in Orcish. The language emerged from him as a harsh sequence of throat sounds, clipped words, and deliberate insults. Across Armageddon, Orc receivers fell silent. Gazkul Mag Uruk Thraka. The name traveled through war camps, gun wagons, ships, and burning hives. You ran from Icaria. Boys stopped fighting to listen. You left lesser orcs to finish the war you feared to face. Wazdaka heard the message within the captured spaceport. His metal teeth ground together. You call yourself the prophet of the Wa. I call you coward. Orcs began roaring at the challenge. Yarrick continued. Wazdaka Gutsmek is not a warlord. He is a messenger, a grot carrying my words across the stars. Wazdaka smashed the nearest mech through a control console. The planetary vox shook beneath orc rage. Yarrick's Baal Eye burned into the recording lens. Old Baal Eye waits upon Armageddon. He leaned closer. Come back and prove which of us should have died upon Icaria. Wazdaka Gutsmek heard the challenge 3 times. The first time, he killed the mech operating the receiver. The second time, he tore the receiver from the wall. The third time, he listened. Yarrick's voice crawled from every functioning voxhorn in Gallows Spaceport, harsh with an Orcish accent.
Learned through decades of hatred. The words echoed through hangars packed with captured aircraft, fuel haulers and mobs drunk upon victory. Gazkul had fled Icaria. Wazdaka was no warlord. Wazdaka was a messenger. The speed boss stood amid the wreckage of the command tower, Big Rever idling beneath him. The warbike's engines shook the deck. Exhaust pipes spat blue flame. Imperial blood ran beneath its wheels and boiled against the engine housings. Around him, the boys waited. They had taken the Hive Heart. They had seized Gallows Spaceport. They had broken Imperial formations, burned tank columns, and dragged thousands of captured Humies behind their bikes until nothing remained but ropes slick with meat. None of it mattered now. Old Baal Eye had called their boss a grot before the entire war. A knob laughed. It was a quiet sound, almost buried beneath the engines. Wazdaka turned Big Rever toward him. The front wheel crossed the knob's body before he could move. Armor collapsed. Ribs burst outward. The rear tire caught the orc's skull and spread its contents across the deck in a black-green fan. No one else laughed. Wazdaka raised one gun. Get every bike. The speedwire stirred. Every buggy, every truck, every wagon what still moves. A mech pointed toward the secured fuel bunkers. Boss, the Humies is still fighting at the cloisters. We gotta hold the port or they'll... Wazdaka shot him through the chest. The round opened the mech from sternum to spine. Blood and fragments of heart struck the aircraft behind him. Old Baal Eye called me a messenger. The speed boss's metal teeth ground together. I'm gonna give him a message. Across Deathmire, secure orc positions emptied. Warbikers abandoned captured supply depots. Buggies left artillery parks unguarded. Gun wagons withdrew from streets where they had pinned entire Steel Legion battalions. Defcoptas rose from Gallows Spaceport in swarms, their crude engines screaming through smoke thick enough to hide hive towers. Every surviving element of the Speedwar turned toward the eyes of the Emperor, exactly as Yarrick intended. The Imperial line formed around the observatory in concentric circles of armor, infantry, and prepared death. The outer ring consisted of ruins. Steel Legion squads occupied collapsed hab blocks whose lower exits had been welded shut. Their officers carried no retreat codes. Ammunition crates filled stairwells. Heavy bolters watched avenues buried beneath corpses. Missile teams waited behind windows stripped of glass. The men had been told where to stand. They had not been told how to leave. Behind them waited the first armor belt. Lehman Russ Punishers stood in hull-down positions beneath broken transit bridges. Their rotary cannon faced the approaches to the observatory. Demolisher squadrons occupied intersections where ranges had been measured in advance. Shadow swords waited farther back, their volcano cannon trained upon the towering silhouettes moving through the ash beyond the hive. The fortress of arrogance occupied the center. Mechanicus crews had labored without rest to free it from beneath the ruined stomper. Replacement track sections came from 3 different Baneblades. Armor plates covered the destroyed sponson. Dried blood remained beneath the new fittings, where the former crew had been pulped inside their station. The machine spirit had refused sedation. It had accepted repairs only while Yarrick remained within sight. Now its engines shook the plaza. Yarrick stood in the command cupola. His greatcoat moved in the furnace wind. The bale eye burned through drifting ash. Beneath the coat, reconstructed muscles and plasteel braces maintained the shape of a man whom Gazkul had already killed once. Colonel Varrick stood inside the command deck. The colonel studied the tactical display through one remaining eye. His augmetic grill hissed with each breath. "Wazdaka has abandoned the Hive Heart approaches," he said. "As predicted. Gallows spaceport is nearly undefended. Yes, we could retake both." Yarrick watched the green threat runes approach. That would encourage caution. Varrick's scarred mouth tightened. "You require him angry. I require him visible." The first air raid warning sounded. Orc aircraft descended through the clouds in a black swarm. Dakar jets rolled between hive. Towers, guns already firing. Streams of shells crossed the Imperial trenches. Men vanished inside the impacts. One heavy bolter team became fragments before its loader heard the engines. Imperial thunderbolts rose to meet them. The aircraft collided above Deathmire in a storm of tracer fire and burning fuel. Wings separated from fuselages. Pilots ejected into gunfire. One thunderbolt fell through an industrial hab, tearing open 30 floors before its munitions detonated in the foundations. Marauder bombers crossed behind the fighter screen. Their bomb bays opened over the speedway. Payloads fell into mobs measured by the 100,000. The first explosions rolled vehicles end over end. Warbikes became burning wheels without riders. Trucks burst, hurling boys through the air in pieces. The blast waves killed almost as efficiently as the fire. Orcs nearest the detonations came apart. Those farther away were driven beneath tires or crushed against vehicle hulls. The rear mobs rode over them without slowing. A burning Dakar jet struck the outer Imperial ring. It entered a hab block sideways. Wings sheared away. The fuselage passed through 3 infantry positions and exploded in a stairwell packed with ammunition. The building opened. Steel Legion soldiers fell from it with the rubble. Some were already dead. Others struck the street alive and broke against the ferrocrete. Orcs surged into the ruin before the dust settled. Yarrick opened the command vox. "Outer infantry, hold." No one asked for how long. "Punisher squadrons, prepare." The speedway entered the first killing zone. Warbikes passed through the ruined avenues too quickly for ordinary infantry to track. Their guns fired continuously. Men were torn from windows and barricades. Buggies struck defensive walls and climbed over them, saw blades cutting through the soldiers beyond. The trapped squads fought until the orcs passed. Then the Punishers fired. Rotary cannon reached full speed. The sound became a solid thing. Shells crossed the avenues in unbroken streams. Warbikes disintegrated. Riders were shredded into green vapor. Buggies lost wheels, armor and crews within the same heartbeat. The vehicles behind entered the debris and piled into wrecks already burning. "Second ring," Yarrick said. "Advance." Lehman Russ battle tanks moved from concealment and fired into the compressed columns. Battle cannon shells struck vehicle masses too dense to miss. Armor, engines, and flesh rose together. Demolishers waited until the orcs entered the inner streets. Their cannon discharged. Entire mobs ceased to exist. Buildings collapsed across the roads, burying attackers and defenders beneath stone. Survivors crawled from the rubble without limbs, their bodies black with ash and blood. Wazdaka came through the bombardment. Big Rever leapt from the roof of a wrecked gun wagon, cleared a burning trench,
and landed upon an Imperial infantry platoon. The front wheels struck the first rank at chest height. Bodies burst. The warbike continued through the formation. Men disappeared beneath its tires. Blood coated the machine from axle to exhaust. A guardsman tried to climb onto the rear armor and drove a bayonet into a fuel line. Wazdaka reached back, seized him by the head, and pulled. The man's helmet came away with most of his face inside it. The speed boss threw both aside. Beyond the hive, Titans and Gargants began their duel. An Imperial warlord Titan strode through the ash, its void shields rippling beneath orc fire. Cathedral towers rose from its back. Banners streamed between weapon housings. Each step shattered roads and collapsed buried tunnels. Across from it came a Gargant built from scrap, stolen engines, and the labor of millions of Gretchen. Its eyes burned red. Cannon filled its arms and belly. Smoke poured from it in black mountains. The Titan's volcano cannon fired. A lance of white light crossed the battlefield and burned through the Gargant's shoulder. Armor, crew, and machinery became vapor. The beam continued into the hive and erased a district behind it. Hundreds of thousands died beneath the mist portion of the shot. The Gargant answered with a mega-weapon that discharged a storm of unstable energy. The warlord's void shields failed one after another. The final impact tore armor from its chest and threw burning Moderati from a command balcony. Other god machines joined them. Warhounds hunted between refinery towers. Smaller orc walkers swarmed their legs. A Reaver Titan lost 1 foot beneath a chain of mines and fell through a manufactorum complex, crushing a population larger than many regiments. The battle was fought by armies. The destruction belonged to gods. Yarrick marked Big Rever upon the tactical display. "Driver, advance." The commander of the Fortress of Arrogance looked toward him. "Directly, Lord Commissar." "Directly." The Baneblade moved into the inner killing zone. Its battle cannon traversed toward Wazdaka. Heavy bolters fired into the mobs surrounding him. Lascannon beams opened gun wagons from engine to crew compartment. Big Rever turned. Wazdaka saw the Commissar standing in the cupola. "Bail I!" His roar crossed the orc channels. Every boy near enough to hear answered. The Baneblade fired. Wazdaka accelerated. The battle cannon shell passed behind him and struck the vehicles following Big Rever. A gun wagon vanished. Buggies were thrown apart. Wheels, engines, torsos, and burning orcs scattered across several hundred meters. Big Rever climbed the wreckage. It launched from a truck's roof and landed upon the Fortress of Arrogance. The impact shook the super-heavy tank. Wazdaka leapt from the saddle before the warbike's tires found purchase. He crossed the command deck as a blur of armor and metal teeth. Yarrick raised the power claw. The speed boss struck first. A crude blade cut through Yarrick's greatcoat. It severed 2 external brace cables and opened the flesh beneath. Blood ran across the plasteel framework. Yarrick answered with the claw. Wazdaka twisted aside. The talons tore armor plates from his ribs and carried strips of green flesh with them. The speed boss laughed. "Too slow, old Humie." He fired one of his weapons at point-blank range. The shot struck Yarrick's chest. The Commissar fell against the cupola rim. Plasteel braces snapped beneath his coat. A rib driven through repaired tissue entered one lung. Blood filled Yarrick's mouth. Wazdaka came again. Yarrick caught the descending arm in the claw. The metal fingers closed around the speed boss's shoulder. Armor buckled. Bone broke. Wazdaka's roar became a scream as the joint collapsed beneath the pressure. He headbutted Yarrick. The blow struck the old fracture left by Gazkul. Yarrick's repaired skull split along the plasteel seam. His living vision darkened. Blood ran from his nose, ear, and bale eye socket. One knee struck the deck. Below them, orcs saw him. The cry began with a single mob. "Bail I!" More voices joined. "Bail I!" The name passed through the speedwire. Yarrick's failing systems awakened. Warning runes filled his sight. His augmetic framework drew power beyond its stored charge.
Locked pistons moved. Severed cables sparked against his ribs. The artificial muscle around his spine contracted hard enough to pull broken bone into alignment. The boys roared louder. Yarrick rose. Wazdaka stepped back. "That ain't right." "No," Yarrick said. The Baelai fired. The beam struck Wazdaka's face. His targeting lens exploded. Metal entered the eye beneath it. The speed boss reeled backward, one hand clawing at the ruined side of his skull. Big Reva's engines screamed nearby. The warbike had lodged against the Baneblade's upper armor, its rear wheels spinning, engine casing exposed by the impact. Yarrick seized the assembly. The power claw entered the machine. Talons closed around cables, fuel feeds, and the unstable core. Big Reva bucked beneath him like a living beast. Yarrick pulled. The engine came free. Fuel sprayed across the command deck. Sparks ignited it. Flame covered both combatants. Spinning machinery tore through orcs, climbing onto the Baneblade. One boy lost its face to a gear assembly. Another was opened from throat to belly by a length of drive chain. Wazdaka fell across the armor. Yarrick advanced through the fire. The speed boss could no longer see from one eye. One shoulder hung crushed. Blood poured between his metal teeth. Still he laughed. "Gazkul's gonna love this." A buggy struck the side of the Baneblade. Its crew fired grapnels onto the upper deck. Two knobs climbed through the flames and dragged Wazdaka toward the vehicle. Yarrick fired the Baelai again. The beam killed one knob. Its head opened, scattering. Cooked brain across the speed boss. The second hauled Wazdaka over the edge. The buggy accelerated before Yarrick could reach it. Steel Legion gunners tracked the fleeing vehicle. "Target acquired," said the Baneblade commander. "Hold fire," Yarrick ordered. Varric stared at him from the hatch. "He is escaping. He is carrying the message." The buggy disappeared into the speedwar. Wazdaka seized its Vox transmitter. Blood ran from his ruined eye and broken mouth. His laughter crossed every orc frequency within range. "Old Baelai lives." The declaration passed from vehicle to vehicle. "He's back. He's Mina. He's got the whole Zoggin world waiting." Orcs roared. Wazdaka lifted his weapon toward the sky. "Tell Gazgakul, tell every boss, the greatest fight in the galaxies started again." The transmission left Armageddon. It moved through orc ships, weird boy dreams, and crude relay stations. Freebooter captains received it. Mechs repeated it. War bosses killed rivals who argued against changing course. Within the eyes of the Emperor, orbital augurs began registering movement. At first, the officers believed the data corrupted. Fleets across multiple systems were altering their vectors. Orc hulks abandoned sieges. Kill cruisers broke from raiding patterns. Convoys turned without navigational logic toward the same destination. Armageddon. A greater concentration moved among them. Its mass distorted every strategic projection. Thousands of ships gathered around a core of impossible scale. Astropathic choirs screamed as the psychic pressure reached them across the void. The identification rune appeared above the tactical display. Gaz Kul Mag Uruk Thraka. Yarrick stood upon the burning command deck of the Fortress of Arrogance. One lung filled with blood. His skull was fractured. Broken braces protruded through his coat. The Baelai remained alight. Far beyond Armageddon, the greatest orc warlord alive turned his empire toward the old man waiting for him. The siege of Deathmire ended without ending. No order declared victory. No commander possessed enough surviving authority to admit defeat. The guns continued because ammunition remained, and men continued dying because no one had yet received permission to stop them. The orcs held the hive heart. Black banners hung from towers built upon mountains of imperial dead. Fires burned within the reactor chapels, staining the clouds with columns of greasy smoke. Boys occupied the guild palaces and administrative halls, sleeping among torn banners, broken statues and bodies too numerous to remove. Gallows spaceport remained in their hands. Its landing fields had become repair yards for the Speedwar.
Mechs stripped Imperial aircraft for engines and guns. Gretchen crawled through fuel conduits, emerging black with promethium. Captured ratings hung from signal masts, some still alive when Dakar jets lifted from the runways beneath them. The Imperium retained the cloisters, the eyes of the Emperor, and most of the western industrial districts. Steel Legion tanks held intersections surrounded by ruins. Infantry slept inside firing positions with their hands around laser guns. Black Templars guarded breach points where Orc corpses lay waist-deep. Every manufactorum still flying the Aquila had become a fortress, a hospital, and a crematorium. Neither army could claim Deathmire, neither could leave. The deadlock became another weapon. Fresh regiments entered the ruins through western transit lines. Orc mobs crossed the Hive Heart in the opposite direction. They collided among collapsed hab towers, killed one another until one side withdrew, then returned hours later with reinforcements. Some streets changed hands so often that neither faction attempted to mark them. Bodies became the only reliable boundary. Imperial corpses faced east. Orc corpses faced west. The casualty reports stopped resembling numbers that belonged to living creatures. Munitorum clerks filled. The 18th Jopal still appeared on 3 campaign ledgers. Every man in the regiment had burned at Junction Corva. The 92nd Hadron continued receiving ammunition allocations that accumulated in a depot no surviving soldier would ever visit. Administratum adepts refused to reassign the shells because the proper seals had died with the regiment's quartermaster. Other formations existed only as names repeated by clerks who feared punishment more than absurdity. The 7th Armageddon line was listed at nearly full strength, despite having fewer than 2,000 men capable of standing. Its commanders had been killed. Its banners had burned. Its surviving soldiers had been distributed among units too damaged to possess names of their own. Still, the regiment remained alive in the records. A number could endure long after every man it described had rotted. Billions were dead, displaced, or missing. Soldiers, laborers, void crew, servitors, pilgrims, hive citizens trapped behind military barricades, penal troops whose explosive collars had detonated when command signals failed, workers sealed inside manufactorums and ordered to maintain production until the Orcs broke through. Entire Hab populations had become unidentifiable beneath the fallen towers. Their bodies lay fused together by fire and pressure, bones driven into flesh until the dead formed solid layers beneath the ruins. Corpse recovery gangs stopped separating human remains from Orc remains. Both went into the furnaces. The smoke rose through Deathmire and darkened the daylight. Above it all, Imperial propaganda proclaimed salvation. Vox towers that had transmitted screams now carried hymns. Pict screens showed Sebastian Yarrick standing upon the fortress of arrogance, Baal Eye burning through the ash. The image had been altered to remove the blood beneath his mouth and the broken armature protruding through his coat. Preachers called his survival a miracle of the Emperor. Munitorum broadcasts declared that old Baal Eye had returned from death to save Armageddon once more. No message mentioned Junction Corva. No sermon named the regiments burned alive within the Prometheum Valley. The abandonment of the Hive Heart became a heroic withdrawal. The fall of Gallows Spaceport became a temporary strategic concession. The executed officers ceased to exist in the official history. Their names disappeared from campaign rolls. Their families received notices stating that the men had died bravely while resisting the Xenos. The truth concerning Project Old Baal remained sealed beneath Deathmire. Yarrick ensured it stayed there. The surviving commanders who had entered the isolated vault received new assignments. General Helbrecht was ordered to oversee the eastern trench belts, where Orc pressure was expected to reach catastrophic levels within days. His posting carried honor, responsibility, and a projected survival period of less than 1 week. Admiral Falks returned to the orbital defense ring aboard a cruiser already judged unfit for combat. Its void shields failed during routine testing. Its ammunition elevators had killed 3 loading crews.
The Admiral saluted when he received the order. Colonel Yarrick was assigned command of the Hive Heart containment line. He read the document once, then looked at Yarrick through his remaining eye. "The estimate gives my command 3 days." "Then delay them for 4, Yarrick said. Yarrick's augmetic grill hissed. "You fear what I know." "No. You expect the orcs to kill me before I speak. I expect you to hold the line." "And if I survive?" Yarrick looked toward the black banners beyond the observation slit. "Then I will give you another line." Yarrick laughed through the grill. It was not a pleasant sound. He saluted with his remaining hand and left. The scribes who had copied Project Old Bail were gathered inside an archive chamber beneath the observatory. There were 9 of them. Each had undergone memory excision, but Croyle did not trust the completeness of the procedure. One scribe still remembered the shape of Yarrick's reconstructed heart. Another had dreamed of orc glyphs for 3 nights after reviewing the behavioral projections. Yarrick entered the chamber alone. The scribes knelt between stacks of sealed records. One began reciting the litany of forgiveness. Yarrick shot him first. The others died before completing their prayers. Lasbolts burned through chests and skulls. One man fell across a record chest, his blood running through the lock mechanism. Another tried to crawl beneath a table. Yarrick seized his ankle with the power claw and dragged him out. The scribe looked up into the Baal eye. "I remember nothing." "That is not sufficient." The claw closed around his torso. Ribs broke inward. Blood burst from his mouth. Yarrick continued applying pressure until the chest collapsed and the spine separated with a wet crack. Promethium was poured across the bodies and the records. The chamber burned until parchment. Only a handful of encrypted files remained. Croyle carried one. The wolf priest carried another. Yarrick possessed none. The Inquisitor found him upon the western observation platform as the Hive Heart artillery began its evening bombardment. Shells passed overhead. The detonations arrived seconds later, deep enough to shake dust from the ceiling. The air beyond the platform smelled of burned metal, chemicals, and bodies left too long in heat. Croyle stood beside Yarrick. "Do you still consider yourself human?" Yarrick watched a distant Hab tower collapse. The structure leaned through the smoke, broke in the middle, and fell upon the Imperial trenches beneath it. Thousands disappeared beneath the ruin. Their Vox signals ended together. Humanity is irrelevant. To an Inquisitor, it is rarely irrelevant. To a Commissar, it is an obstacle. Croyle studied the pallid flesh around Yarrick's scars. "Your heart has stopped 4 times since Wazdaka's assault." It resumed. "Your augmetics continue drawing energy without a source. They function. Your grafted tissue no longer matches the degradation projections. It remains attached." Croyle's mouth tightened. "You answer every question as though function absolves cause. It does. That is not how the Inquisition operates. It is how war operates." Yarrick turned toward him. "A Commissar's duty is not to remain human. It is to ensure that other humans die in the required direction." Croyle said nothing. Below them, an Imperial battery fired. The shells descended into the Hive Heart. Green explosions answered. Somewhere among the ruins, thousands of men and orcs ceased existing so that a line upon a map might remain unchanged. The Inquisitor looked toward the battlefield. "Then perhaps the reconstruction changed less than I believed." The wolf priest waited inside the damaged command deck of the Fortress of Arrogance. Mechanicus Adepts had restored the Baneblade's primary systems, but the machine still carried the wounds of its fight with Wazdaka. One sponson remained sealed. The command cupola had been scorched black. Big Reva's fuel had burned across the upper armor, leaving metal warped beneath Yarrick's boots. The priest ran one gauntlet along the command throne. "The Iron Beast grieves," he said, "for its crew, for battle unfinished." Yarrick entered. The machine spirit recognized him. Internal lumens brightened.
The engine turned once beneath the deck and settled into a low growl. The wolf priest watched the command runes awaken. I do not know what sustains you. You participated in making it. I know what we placed within your body. I do not know what makes it endure. Yarrick removed his greatcoat. The priest's skull helm followed the motion. Broken sections of armature crossed Yarrick's chest and spine. Fresh braces had been fastened over old ones. Scars surrounded the metal. Some were pale with age. Others remained raw. The grafts should have failed, the priest continued. Your heart should weaken. The bones should rot around the anchors. You should be dead. I have heard that before. It may be our work. It may be your will. It may be the hand of the All-Father upon you. The Emperor does not waste miracles on men. The priest laughed. Perhaps not. Or perhaps, Yarrick said, the orcs refuse to permit their story to end. The skull-helm turned toward him. That thought troubles you? No. It should. The cause does not matter while the result remains useful. The priest considered this, then inclined his head. Aye, you sound more Fenrisian than you know. He left Yarrick alone with the tank. The command deck became silent, except for the movement of cooling metal. Yarrick unfastened the damaged section of his armature. The first clasp released. Pain entered immediately. Without the brace, broken structures inside his chest shifted under their own weight. A rib moved against one lung. Grafted muscle tightened around the wound with an unnatural speed. He removed the second plate. Pale flesh showed beneath it. Some scars were his. He remembered the blade, bullet, or orc that had made each one. The old wound where Ugelhard's claw tore away his arm. The burns from Hades. The surgical cuts left by Imperial medici decades earlier. Other scars belonged to no memory. They crossed tissue, whose origin the wolf priest refused to name. Veins ran through it in patterns unlike those elsewhere upon his body. When Yarrick pressed one finger against the flesh, it contracted before he completed the motion. His heart stopped. There was no warning. One moment it struck against his ribs. The next, stillness filled his chest. The bale eye dimmed. Yarrick remained seated. He did not call for medici assistance. Seconds passed. Outside the Baneblade, distant orcs began chanting. The sound traveled through Deathmire's ruins and entered the tank through armor thick enough to resist battle cannon fire. Baal Eye! The chant grew. Baal Eye! The machine spirit stirred. Yarrick's heart convulsed. Black blood surged through reconstructed vessels. The augmetic framework tightened across his spine. The Baal Eye flared red. He drew breath. Far beyond Armageddon, Wazdaka's transmission reached Gazgakul Mag Uruk Thraka. It passed through crude relays, freebooter ships, and weird boy dreams. The images arrived corrupted by static, but the important parts remained. Yarrick standing upon the Baneblade, the blazing eye, the power claw tearing Big Reva's heart from its frame, the challenge spoken in Orcish. Gazgakul watched from the command chamber of a vessel large enough to cast a shadow across cities. War bosses crowded around him. Mechs waited in silence. Gretchen pressed themselves against the walls, afraid even to breathe. The recording ended. Gazgakul began to laugh. The sound shook the chamber. It passed through the ship on open vox. Boys heard it in ammunition holds, engine decks and launch bays. Other ships received it and transmitted it farther. Millions of orcs joined him. The laughter became a roar. Engines ignited across the fleet. Kill cruisers turned. Hulks corrected their impossible paths. Rocks loaded with armies changed course. Armageddon appeared upon every crude navigation display. The promised world. The old war. The enemy who would not remain dead. Upon Deathmire, Yarrick climbed to the roof of the Eyes of the Emperor. Black banners rose through the smoke. Some belonged to the orcs. Others marked Imperial regiments too damaged to display proper colors. Around the city, artillery batteries continued firing.
Trench crews labored beneath chemical rain. Recovery teams dragged tanks from rubble, while medici servitors removed useful organs from men who had not yet finished dying. Yarrick opened the command vox. Reload every surviving gun. Acknowledgements answered from across the hive. Deepen the western trenches. Mine every approach to the observatory. Move the remaining armor beneath hardened cover. General Helbrecht's voice emerged through static. Corpse clearance is incomplete. The roads remain obstructed. Leave the dead. My lord, stack them along the approaches. Human and orc bodies already filled the streets. Some had swollen until uniforms split around them. Others were burned black or crushed into forms no longer recognizable as men. Let the arriving orcs see what was spent before them, Yarrick said. Let Gazgul know what his absence cost. Across the hive, soldiers obeyed. The dead were pulled into walls. Severed heads were removed from orc trophies and placed upon stakes facing east. Destroyed tanks were welded into barricades. Guns whose crews had died were cleaned, reloaded, and assigned to men who had never fired them before. Armageddon prepared for the war it had been built to suffer. The Imperium had not reconstructed Sebastian Yarrick to save the world. It had rebuilt him so the world would burn brightly enough to be seen across the galaxy. It had restored his broken body, fed armies into his legend, and turned Armageddon into an altar upon which billions would be sacrificed. His name was the invocation. His survival was the flame. Gazgul was coming. That had been the purpose from the beginning. Yarrick stood above Deathmire while the first distant augur alarms began to sound. He understood what the Imperium believed him to be. Bait, a visible weakness, a living insult placed before the greatest orc warlord alive. The Imperium was mistaken. Yarrick had not accepted resurrection merely to hang upon the end of its line. He would not wait helplessly for the jaws to close. He was the hook buried beneath the bait. He was the chain that would tighten when Gazgul swallowed. And when the prophet of the War came close enough to discover the difference, Sebastian Yarrick intended to become the blade inside his throat.